The white expanse known as the snowfield lies at the world's center, a frozen land crawling with dreadful beasts. Legends speak of a vast serpent that swallows glaciers whole, a hulking bear whose footsteps shake the frozen ground, and a cursed rat able to poison seas with its touch. Yet an emperor who once escaped claimed those monsters were not the greatest peril hidden there. At the heart of this wasteland, a man clashes with a monstrous scorpion-like creature, ending the fight quickly with a single decisive blow. One companion sneers afterward, mocking his brutish nature and the pride he seems to take in flaunting ignorance. The silver-haired youth grumbles in irritation, wondering how much longer he must travel with such fools, while the girl with them tilts her head and innocently asks if ignorance is something edible, leaving him to groan and tell her to forget it. Soon his anger shifts to the food he had forbidden them to eat. Shocked, they consumed it all within a week despite his warnings it was lethal. To his disbelief, the girl and the bald man beam as if his scolding were praise, treating their recklessness like a challenge one. Moments later the bald man, Greta, clutches his stomach and collapses, leaving the girl to panic and scream at him to wake. Amid the chaos, the silver-haired youth thinks bitterly that this is nothing like the dream he once had of living in a magical world. His thoughts drift back to when he abandoned his job, determined to seek wonder. He scaled the world's tallest peak, ventured to its core, and reached its southernmost edge, yet nothing extraordinary happened. Each night he prayed to escape reality's dullness, yearning for a fantastical life, and though the magic he wished for never came, he never gave up hoping. Then, one day, his prayer was finally answered. The scene shifts to that memory, a man trembling under fierce winds and biting snow, while a companion beside him warns to wrap tighter in furs or freeze to death. Both are part of a mercenary company trailing their captain through the dreaded snowfield. One grumbles the mission is suicide, reward or not, and calls the journey madness, only to be cut off by the captain's sharp reminder that they had all agreed to this job. The man fires back that no one told them the cold itself would be such a merciless enemy. Inside a heated carriage, an old servant leans toward a young noblewoman and asks if Lady Mylina of House Akasha is well. She replies calmly that she is fine. From outside come faint voices of guards cursing the bitter cold, which makes the servant scowl and call them insolent, but Mylina gently defends them, reminding him that these men were the only ones who agreed to guard them through such a deadly land, even suggesting they should be brought in to escape the freezing air. The servant refuses and firmly warns her of what prowls beyond the endless snow, and when she guesses he means the monsters, he begins a grim tale. Long ago, an ambitious emperor sought to conquer the snowfield and marched into its depths with his finest warriors. Yet years later his empire had collapsed, and he returned alone, aged and broken. He confirmed the existence of the beasts but claimed the greatest threat there was not a creature, but a barbarian, calling the place a living hell where no one survives. Though the servant dismisses this as myth, Mylina counters that the emperor's words carried weight, for most of the creatures he spoke of were later proven real. The servant concedes with a smile, adding that none have ever truly claimed to meet such a barbarian, and she admits that is true. Suddenly the captain halts the group outside, spotting a faint figure in the storm. He notes the shape is small but moving straight toward them. The mercenaries tense as it nears, first thinking it human before dread sets in, for it is a barbarian striding with ease through the snow. He says he left the others for a walk, introducing himself as Ketil of the Ashen tribe, and grins at the coincidence of meeting strangers here, calling it luck. His sharp eyes scan the company, correctly guessing they are mercenaries escorting a caravan, and he advises them to turn back though he clearly doubts they will. Glancing at the carriage, he asks if their employer is inside, then flashes a grin and declares he wants to be hired. Stunned, the mercenaries hesitate until one questions why a barbarian would offer work like a common sellsword, and another wonders if this means he is not an enemy. Ketil replies bluntly that if he were, they would all already be dead. Uneasy, the men look to the captain, who then reports the offer to Mylina. Hearing it, her servant quickly asks what would happen if they chose to fight him, and the captain warns firmly against such folly. Mylina listens in silence before deciding they should accept. The captain bows and delivers the message, which Ketil greets with a pleased grin before walking straight toward the carriage. Alarmed, the captain warns him to behave, but the barbarian only tells him to relax, saying they are both employees now and he must speak directly with his employer. One mercenary nervously asks if letting him through is truly wise, while another laughs at the idea of stopping him, dismissing it as nothing but a bad joke. Inside the carriage, the servant grows alarmed when Mylina readies herself to step out, but she gently tells him to stay calm. From outside, Ketil's voice rings out as he asks permission to enter, startling her for a moment before she regains composure and allows it. The door creaks open, and the barbarian steps inside. Kido casts a glance at the servant and tells him to relax, assuring he means no harm. Mylina can hardly believe it. The legendary barbarian stands before her. She greets him with nervous formality, and he returns it with a calm nod before remarking on the cozy warmth of the carriage, noting how rare such comfort must be in the snowfield. She explains it is sustained through magic, which earns his approving nod as though it is exactly what he expected of this world. Without wasting time, he warns her that the land is far too dangerous and her current guards are unlikely to keep her alive, offering to take over their protection under one condition. When she asks what that is, he answers simply, knowledge. He wants information from beyond the snowfield, anything she can share. Though hesitant, she realizes she has little choice and agrees, which softens his tone as he asks her name. She introduces herself as Mylina of House Akasha, and he responds with a grin, giving his own name and saying it is a pleasure to work with her. His thoughts drift as the scene shifts inward. He recalls the cruel irony of his dream. Once, he had longed for a fantastical life, and his wish was granted in the harshest way when he suddenly awoke as a barbarian in the endless white wasteland. There had been no time to grasp why, only the freezing winds, the constant threat of monsters, and the crushing weight of leading a tribe. Years blurred together in misery as he fought desperately to break free, chained by a mysterious, incomplete quest that never allowed him to leave until fulfilled. Just as despair took hold, outsiders would sometimes appear, though most attacked him in fear or went mad from the snowfield's horrors. Yet from them, he learned the truth: the world beyond was the magical realm he had always wished for. That discovery reignited his will. No longer was he struggling just to endure. He fought to escape, completing every task and slaying countless beasts with the hope that one day he would be free. The fragments of knowledge he gathered from outsiders became priceless treasures, and after so long surrounded only by fellow barbarians, speaking now with Mylina feels like a rare relief. The memory fades as the present returns. Glancing at the carriage, Kido casually observes that they are transporting weapons, which startles Mylina. When she asks how he knows, he replies he can hear the faint clatter of blades, making it obvious. Then, with a sharp look, he asks if war is brewing. She nods and explains the Empire and the Kingdom are locked in conflict, earning from him a faint, knowing smirk as he remarks that the outside world is far from peaceful. Mylina explains that the great empire presses forward with overwhelming numbers while the kingdom stubbornly holds the line with sword masters and heroes, and that mention sparks Kido's curiosity about what power those titles wield. Surprised, she asks if he does not know of mysticism, and he answers flatly that he has never left the snowfield. She admits she cannot map every detail but lays out what she does know. Mysticism is rare, only a few can sense it and fewer can use it, and its users are ranked. Third rank merely perceives it. Second rank can wield it. First rank manifests it as mana or aura, where knights, mages, and elementalists usually sit, and beyond that lie beings beyond comprehension. The transcendent who can command mysticism to split heaven and earth. A sword master belongs among those, and a hero stands above even that, able to shape the fate of nations, while even a third rank wielder is notable in a small region. He smiles and says he would like to meet them, leaving her bewildered, and inwardly he grows sharp and bitter as he counts the endless time he has been trapped here, remembering that every day was survival and that his single thought has hardened from want to must. He must get out. When she asks if he is truly the barbarian from the old tales, he allows that one could say so, and her expression shows she already suspected as much, which surprises him until he chuckles and realizes the madman he once met must have been the emperor from her story, meaning her legend likely holds truth because such a man did come here long ago. Shifting the subject, he narrows his eyes and questions why they would haul so many weapons along the most dangerous path. She explains her merchant family has been ruined by rival plots and this shipment is their last chance to stave off total collapse. He studies her, smirks, and lays out the simple logic. The empire fights with vast numbers and thus ample arms, while the kingdom, desperate for supplies, will pay dearly when demand far outstrips supply. Kido remarks that even without knowing the outside market, the profit must be high enough to make such a reckless journey worthwhile, then adds that choosing this route means there is no other path to the kingdom, so their lands must border the empire. Mylina confirms he is right, struck by how sharp his reasoning is, so different from the tales of a savage and ignorant brute. She begins to wonder who this man truly is. Suddenly the carriage jolts hard, the servant gasps in fright, and Kido stays composed as he calmly notes they now have uninvited guests. From the swirling snow outside, a massive warped creature rises, towering over the mercenaries. They recognize it instantly, a black slime. Keto asks its name, and Mylina confirms, explaining it is a monster well documented in the archives. For years, many strong adventurers entered the snowfield, yet only a handful returned, and their records almost always mention this beast. She glances at Keto, asking if he knows it. Of course, he replies without pause, calling the rubbery things not bad as food, even a decent meal. Horrified, she blurts out if he truly eats them. With a smirk, he offers to hunt a few together, but she quickly refuses. Meanwhile, the black slime begins to quake, signaling an attack. All eyes turn toward him, but he calmly raises a hand, reminding them of their pact. He protects their lives but only steps in if true danger arises. For now, they must handle it themselves, as he also needs to measure the strength of those from outside. The creature lunges, shaking the earth as it slams forward. Shields lock as the captain bellows for his men to hold, yet the slime's crushing force rattles their line. A fighter leaps high to strike but is batted aside like an insect, cursing its overwhelming strength as he slams into the snow. Narrowing his eyes, the captain suddenly realizes its flaw. It can only move straight ahead. He orders the men to spread out and coordinate, and they swiftly adapt, weaving past its charges and landing blows in unison. Steel flashes, tearing into the rubbery mass as the monster shrieks, but the captain shouts to keep pressing the attack. Their efforts prove futile, normal strikes doing little to weaken it. He calls out to target the nucleus hidden inside, then raises his own sword, heat blazing along its edge, and with a fierce cry, he drives the glowing blade straight into the monster's body. A red, pulsating core surfaces within the slime, and with one decisive strike it shatters, causing the creature's body to collapse and melt into a steaming puddle that sinks into the snow. Breathless and wide-eyed, the mercenaries erupt in disbelief, cheering that they actually managed to kill it. Their triumph is cut short when a thunderous growl shakes the field, and from the storm emerges a massive white wolf, fur bristling and fangs bared. A fighter shouts to strike its neck, and steel flashes as another leaps onto the beast. After a fierce clash, the wolf falls lifeless, and one mercenary scoffs that the snowfield is not as terrifying as the stories made it seem. The captain fixes him with a sharp glare, warning not to grow arrogant. They are not even halfway through. Talk shifts toward Ketel, as one man doubts if the barbarian is truly as powerful as the Emperor's tales, pointing out that he hasn't lifted a hand to fight. Another sneers that perhaps he sits at the bottom of the snowfield's food chain, hiding behind them for protection, and suggests putting his strength to the test. Inside the carriage, silence lingers between Mylina and Ketel until a mercenary steps up to address her. He reminds her that their lives are on the line, and though she meets his gaze with gratitude, thanking them for their courage when others refuse this task, he presses on. Their concern is the barbarian, who has yet to prove himself, despite being given such privilege. From the front, the captain mutters that he tried to hold them back, but they wouldn't listen. Having stayed quiet until now, Ketel finally speaks in a calm tone, saying he doesn't mind a test of strength, but not yet, because others arrived before them. At that moment, an ominous voice ripples through the frozen air, low and venomous, savoring the thought of fragile humans stumbling into its domain, mocking them as prey. The mercenaries stiffen, eyes scanning the blizzard, until a colossal white serpent slithers into view, its ghostly coils cutting through the snow like a nightmare come alive, hissing that their screams and suffering will only make them taste sweeter. The crushing pressure pouring from the serpent drives Mylina and the mercenaries to cry out in pain, but Ketel steps forward, his voice cutting sharply through the storm, commanding it to stop since these people are his guests and must be left alone. The beast tilts its head, eyes locking coldly on him as it demands to know why he is here, reminding him that his tribe's lands are forbidden. Ketel answers flatly that it is none of its concern. Rage sparks in the serpent's gaze as it declares itself the immortal one promised eternity, scoffing at his audacity to give orders. With a smirk, he replies that it only means the creature needs to be disciplined, and in the next heartbeat he surges forward. The clash detonates into a blinding shockwave that rips across the snowfield, rattling the carriage and drawing a scream from Mylina as the violent force tears past. When the haze clears, Ketel looms over the battered serpent, muttering that some beings only understand after a proper beating. Mylina watches in stunned silence as he lifts his weapon again, assuring her not to worry, for he will end it swiftly. His final strike bursts with overwhelming light, engulfing the serpent's massive form until it vanishes, leaving only steaming snow where it once stood. The mercenaries, who had questioned him moments ago, collapse to their knees, begging forgiveness, but Keto dismisses them with a simple wave, saying it is fine. Keto remarks that trusting a stranger is no simple task, then turns to Mylina with a sharp look, pointing out that her manner and dress betray her as more than a mere family envoy and asking why she chose to undertake this mission herself. After a pause, she reveals the truth. She is the eldest daughter of Velika, concubine to Lord Kasakasha. Her mother, taken into political convenience, was cast aside and left powerless, and though counted among the household, both lived as little more than servants. She admits she stepped forward for this dangerous journey because someone needed to set an example. Keto nods, saying she is clever, ambitious, and greedy. Soon the harsh white expanse opens into a breathtaking view of rolling green fields, marking the end of the snowfield. The mercenaries halt, stunned by the sudden shift in scenery, while Mylina turns with gratitude to thank him. He shrugs it off, advising her to return to the Empire once the weapons are sold, as that way will be easier. Yet her curiosity lingers. She presses him about his earlier words, calling her smart and ambitious. Smirking, he answers that he meant exactly what he said, then leans closer to explain that her family, once prestigious, has fallen into chaos from financial ruin. Even as the child of a concubine, if she personally acts and rescues the household from collapse, who will the people trust and follow? He leaves the thought hanging before bluntly concluding that her true aim must be to claim real authority within her family. Meeting his gaze, she softly admits he is correct. He smirks again, remarking that it is a familiar tale, an illegitimate child risking everything to earn inheritance. Inwardly, Mylina marvels at him, realizing this barbarian is unlike the shallow, half-learned noble she had known, carrying both piercing insight and overwhelming might. She finds herself wondering what it would mean if such strength, the kind that felled the white serpent without effort, belonged to her. The thought lingers until she makes him an offer. If he ever considers leaving the snowfield, he should come with her. Keto shakes his head, saying not yet, as he still has unfinished business here. She doesn't insist, instead slipping off a small piece of jewelry and handing it to him, telling him that if he ever escapes, he should seek the Akasha family and show this token so they will recognize him. He accepts with a grin, promising to remember, and they part ways with her expressing her thanks and hope they might meet again as the carriage rolls off into the distance. 5 years later, deep in the white snowfield, glowing text materializes before him. Quest number 1784 completed, all conditions satisfied. Another message follows, declaring he may now leave. At long last, he steps forward toward a shimmering barrier. Crossing into new land, he breathes in deeply, the fragrance of grass, animals, and running water filling his lungs for the first time in years. A smile spreads across his face as he turns back toward the endless snow, shouting that he will never return to that prison. This is his first real step into the fantasy world he had longed for, and though the beginning had been harsh, he endured. With dragons, elves, magic, and swords awaiting him, he vows to savor every moment. It was this desire that kept him alive through years of struggle. His thoughts break when he hears voices ahead, and excitement rushes through him at the sight of what looks like a village. After years among savages without homes, the image of a proper settlement brings him warmth. While thinking of how to greet them, he hears an announcement welcoming elves to their new home. Stopping, he watches them unload belongings, smiling in relief, while a young elf nervously asks an elder if they are truly safe here. The elder assures him they are, explaining that the snowfield has remained quiet for millennia and that a barrier conceals their location. With concealment magic making this land appear as nothing but a forest, no outsider would ever find them, and with their queen nearby, even beasts would keep away. As he passes the forest's edge, he suddenly feels a faint pull, like slipping through something unseen, but he dismisses the odd sensation, unaware he has broken through the barrier. Deeper in, he soon spots a lost elf child, and his heart leaps at the sight of the very race he had once dreamed of meeting. To him, every hardship suddenly feels worth it, yet the girl is frightened and cries, having wandered too far. Approaching with a gentle greeting, he startles her, and she faints. Catching her quickly, he holds her in confusion, wondering what to do. With no choice, he carries her toward the village, convinced that returning her will win him the elves' goodwill. But when he arrives, her mother screams in terror at the sight of him holding her daughter. Weapons are drawn, and suspicion hardens in their eyes. They demand to know how a human entered their sanctuary. Shocked, he tries to calm them, yet the elder declares such a thing impossible. News spreads fast that the barrier is cracked, and panic rises with the queen absent on a brief patrol. He raises his hand in peace, insisting he is not an enemy, But a warrior snarls a warning that if he does not release the girl, he will be hunted forever. Realizing they think he is a kidnapper, he sets the child down gently, telling her to go back. She stares at him in fear before screaming and running to her mother's arms, her cries echoing so loud that he blinks in disbelief, muttering to himself if his face is really so frightening. He tries to reason with them, pointing out that he returned her unharmed, but the elder instead declares the hostage released and gives the order to attack. Arrows whistle through the air, and he sighs, realizing no one intends to listen. Elder remains stuck in shock, wondering what just happened. Cattell stands inside the crater formed by the blast, repeating that he is not their enemy, while thinking that perhaps he used a little too much power. At that moment, another arrow strikes at Cattell surrounded by a fiery aura like a phoenix, and the impact creates a violent explosion of flames. The attack was launched by Elf Queen Mars Arya Hashian Kuroja, who demands to know what is going on. Elder tells her that a human tried to attack them. The queen says her fears have come true and that this place is no longer safe. Cattell, unscathed, tries to speak with her, hoping she will listen. Elder is stunned that Cattell is still standing even after taking a direct hit from their queen. The queen questions if Cattell is another powerful enemy who came to harm them. Internally, she thinks of humans as vile creatures and introduces herself as the queen of the Leaf tribe. She aims a shining arrow at Cattell, declaring that anyone who challenges her will pay a heavy price. Feeling frustrated, Cattell wonders why they cannot communicate despite speaking the same language, or perhaps the queen is deliberately ignoring him. He questions if relations between humans and elves are truly this bad. Deciding that words will not work, he recalls the lesson he learned in the snowfields. If they refuse to listen, strike until they yield. The queen takes aim and releases her magical arrow, which transforms into the head of a massive spectral dragon rushing at Cattell. Preparing to counter, he channels energy into his fist and punches the spectral dragon arrow with immense force. A dazzling flash of light floods the entire battlefield, and moments later his punch shatters the arrow completely. The queen's eyes widen in disbelief at the sight. Looking at his fist with regret, Cattell thinks he may have used too much strength again. Immediately after, a thunderous boom echoes as smoke and light clear to reveal the queen lying on the ground, covered in dust and wounds. Cattell reflects that he should have controlled his power better. From the fight, the queen realizes that Cattell is at least a transcendent-level warrior of immense strength, and wonders why such a powerful human is here. Recognizing his might, the elf queen orders her people to retreat for safety, and the elves follow her command. She tells Cattell that while she acknowledges his power, she assures him that he will never achieve his goal. Internally, Cattell admits the situation has completely collapsed, though he only wanted to talk. The queen then begins casting a powerful spell, summoning a creature born of pure flames. She calls forth a great fire bull spirit named Figo. Cattell grows excited, thinking the monsters of the snowfields were strange and frightening, but this is a true summoning. He recalls that some creatures in the snowfield looked fantastical, but most were hideous. This horned fire bull, however, was something else entirely. He believes this is a real spirit, the embodiment of true fantasy. The queen commands Figo to destroy the enemy. But the high-level fire spirit, annoyed, mutters that summoning contracts are nothing but trouble and headaches. The queen silences him, thinking that powerful spirits are usually old and arrogant. She acknowledges that without help from another tribe, she would not have been able to complete this contract. Once again, she orders Figo to fulfill it. Figo asks if the contract requires him to kill the human before him, but suddenly senses something strange about Cattell. He perceives his terrifying energy, and wonders if Cattell is even truly human. Cattell remains half-dazed by the grandeur of the moment until it strikes him that the enemy marked for elimination is none other than himself, his thrill draining into flat disappointment. Monster's voice lowers, heavy with scorn, declaring a human who dares covet a race of nature deserves to burn. The fiery spirit charges, a blazing juggernaut of wrath, while Cattell braces for impact. A thunderous shockwave splits the air, making the queen flinch before daring to open her eyes, stunned to see him unmoved, one hand clamped around Monster's flaming horn as if it weighed nothing. A slow grin spreads across his face as he remarks that this feels far easier, since he never hesitates when crushing monsters. With one motion, he unleashes his full might, the blast ripping through the forest, shattering stone, and roaring into the skies. The queen screams against the violent shockwave as the lush woodland is obliterated into a vast crater. At its center, Cattell strides toward her, finding her battered on the ground as she pleads for her people to be spared. Calmly, he assures her that she is not his enemy. She stares in silence, unable to grasp his words, yet after bitter debate and reluctant listening, the elves finally accept the truth. He had never come to harm them. The queen steps forward, bowing in apology, admitting they had been too quick to judge and regretting that the one who returned a lost child was mistaken for an enemy. Cattell replies with understanding, acknowledging their caution after being driven from their home by humans, though he admits the refusal to hear him stun. Studying him closely, she notes he is unlike the humans who hunted them, confessing it is the first time she has ever seen an elf. He tells her there are none in the white snowfield, and at that cursed name her eyes widen as she calls him the barbarian. He smirks, saying that is the name strangers gave him. Shocked, she says she thought survival there was impossible, then her expression darkens with concern as she wonders aloud if his escape means others could have survived as well. Ketil explains that the snowfield has laws even dragons cannot defy, and for some unknown reason, he alone managed to leave after completing a quest, a rare exception he doubts others could share. The queen's sternness softens with relief, but his gaze shifts as he bluntly remarks that her summoned beast had been cleaved apart. She offers a faint smile, assuring him there is no need for concern, for spirits are beings of nature, unlike mortals, and simply return to their realm rather than die. Her tone then grows formal as she bows her head, apologizing for her earlier hostility and offering to grant him a wish. The word spirit lingers in his thoughts, stirring a sharp question, whether one not of elf blood could form a contract with such beings. She hesitates, explaining that ordinarily it is impossible, yet admits that certain humans deeply attuned to nature may succeed. His eyes narrow with interest, his voice steady as he tells her to explain how. After a moment of silence, she finally responds, telling him to seek Eldo, the sacred land of the elves where their god dwells, for there he may find a spirit willing to form a contract. She admits that with her recommendation he might be permitted entry, but warns that its location must remain secret. Inwardly, she hesitates, torn over revealing Eldo Sargato, the very heart of her people, since no elf entrusts such knowledge to outsiders, fearing human greed. Yet she makes her decision, drawing out a radiant crystal and offering it to him. She explains that even if he reaches the Holy Land, their god will test him, though she believes he will endure. She wishes him safety on his path. He accepts the crystal with a firm nod, offering thanks. She introduces herself as Marzelia Haitian, queen of the Leaf tribe, and when she asks his name, he answers with a faint grin, calling himself the barbarian. Not long after, he speeds through the vast forest, his leaps covering ground at an astonishing pace until he arrives at the borders of Verkan territory in the kingdom of Garrett. At the gates, guards stiffen at the distant rumble of thunder, then flinch as an immense surge of energy rushes toward them. Their captain's expression darkens as he orders the bell sounded and calls the troops to arms. Moments later, the ground explodes beneath a heavy landing, dust and fragments scattering as Ketil appears before them. The captain freezes, stunned by the unexpected sight. Cattell lifts a hand casually in greeting. He asks if they are the guards stationed here, and the men tighten their grips on their weapons, exchanging cautious glances. One mutters, questioning whether he's the source of the commotion. Another takes in Cattell's gray hair and the scar slicing across his chest, eyes widening in recognition. "That's the Ashen Barbarian," one murmurs. As Cattell steps closer, they raise their weapons, warning him not to advance or they will strike. He responds with calm assurance that he means no harm and just wants to speak. One guard swallows nervously before asking what he wants. Cattell gestures toward the city gate. The nearest guard frowns, confused by the direction of his hand. Cattell plainly states he wishes to visit their territory. The guard gapes. "You want to do what?" Cattell simply replies, "Later." Inside a modest but secure room, the captain studies Cattell across the table. He asks if his sole purpose is to pass through. Cattell admits he might stay for a while if possible. The captain taps the table, pressing for a name, proof of identity, or someone to vouch for him. Cattell shakes his head, then recalls the crest Molina had given him, her words echoing in his mind about showing it to the Akasha family if he ever left the snowfield. He retrieves it from his belongings and sets it on the table. The captain narrows his eyes. Cattell explains it is the crest of the Akasha family, given to him by a descendant. The captain leans back, remembering the merchant family from the kingdom of Dinian, the caravan that once ventured to the snowfield, and their swift rise in influence. Cattell asks if the crest is sufficient to confirm his identity. The captain admits it appears genuine but notes it isn't from their kingdom, so he cannot verify it fully. After a pause, he adds that it is still useful and he will allow entry under one condition. Cattell raises an eyebrow. The captain explains that 3 others with uncertain identities are also attempting entry, so he must join them to clear a nearby dungeon as proof of non-threat. Cattell smirks at the simplicity of the task. The captain leans forward, warning him not to get comfortable, revealing a second condition. After the dungeon, he must report every detail of the operation. Cattell caught on immediately, impressed by the strategy. Smart. Let the unknowns watch one another, compare stories, and see who falters first. The captain cleared his throat, shifting the topic. He asked if Cattell was truly a barbarian. Without hesitation, Cattell confirmed he was. The captain shook his head in disbelief, admitting he had never encountered a barbarian like him, and had always assumed they were an ignorant people. Rising, he ended the meeting, ordering him to leave at once. Elsewhere, in a waiting room, Alessandro Tyrannis, a self-proclaimed holy knight, paced in irritation, grumbling about being forced to enter a dungeon alongside a lowly swindler who preyed on others. From a chair, the thief Kazan Hawk grinned and teased, reminding him of a past defeat and asking if that was the source of his anger. Alessandro's eyes flared with indignation at being mocked by a thief. Kazan scanned him with a mocking smile, noting the dented, rusty armor and pointing out that if he were a true holy knight, he wouldn't be here at all, just a wandering fighter like him, an insect of the same breed. Slamming a hand on the table, Alessandro demanded he repeat it, questioning if that scrap metal could really protect him. Before the argument escalated, a soft voice intervened. Hayes, a cleric of Colosia, a priestess and the team's 3rd member, stepped between them, concern filling her eyes. She reminded them they were supposed to work together to clear a dungeon, not fight each other. The guard captain entered, explaining that the dungeon required at least 4 participants, and that one more teammate had arrived. The priestess clasped her hands, hoping the last member would be normal. The captain left the judgment to them, then opened the door. Cattell stepped in, and all 3 team members froze, expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Cattell scanned the room cheerfully and asked if these were his teammates. Alessandro eyed him warily. The priestess tilted her head, unease creeping into her voice as she murmured about his massive size and questioned if he was even human. Kazan narrowed his eyes, taking in the newcomer with caution. The pressure from the newcomer was palpable. Cattell greeted them casually with a smile. The guard captain cleared his throat and suggested they introduce themselves while he stepped out briefly. Cattell went first, announcing himself as Cattell Barbarian, then turned to the thief. "And you, Kazan?" he asked. The thief muttered his name reluctantly. Cattell's attention shifted to the armored man. "And you, Alessandro Tyrannis?" The self-proclaimed holy knight answered stiffly. Curious, Cattell asked if he wielded holy power. Alessandro looked away, admitting that he was a special kind of holy knight who couldn't use it. The priestess stepped forward, introducing herself as Hayes, a servant of the god of lies and deceit. Cattell blinked in surprise, then asked why her status wasn't confirmed despite being a priestess. Her gaze dimmed as she explained that the god she served was not highly regarded. Once introductions were complete, the guard captain returned, giving them the go-ahead to depart. The 4 set off together, the tension between them thick and unspoken. At the dungeon site, an escorting guard pointed to the jagged stone entrance, explaining it extended 3 floors deep and was inhabited by undead. Their task was clear the dungeon and retrieve the crest. Cattell glanced at Kazan and told him to explain the plan before they began. Kazan started cautiously, affirming he would. Cattell grinned and cut him off, telling him to drop the "sir." They were comrades now. Kazan nodded and outlined the strategy. Cattell and the warrior Alessandro would take the front line, he would scout for traps, and the priestess would provide support from the rear with her divine powers. Cattell approved, much to Kazan's quiet surprise, then led the group enthusiastically into the dark depths of the dungeon. The corridors stretched endlessly, pitch black and eerily silent, without traps or locked gates. Kazan frowned, noting the unsettling normalcy. Suddenly, he halted and signaled the team, "Monster ahead." Cattell squinted into the shadows but saw nothing, until his eyes caught the bone fragments littering the floor. Skeletons, he realized, lying in wait to rise and attack anyone who stepped too close. Kazan's gut twisted. This wasn't just a test, it was a trap to weed out unwanted outsiders. Cattell murmured the word. "Skeletons," testing its weight. Alessandro spoke gravely, warning that even severed limbs wouldn't stop them and their bony frames made them tough to damage. The dungeon's difficulty had just spiked. Kazan took point again, instructing the priestess to ready her divine power, Alessandro to keep his shield raised, and Cattell to aim for the skeleton's necks, striking repeatedly if needed, their weak point. Cattell thought silently that Kazan was a capable leader. As they advanced, a skeleton clawed its way up from the ground, empty eye sockets glowing faintly. The team tensed, weapons ready, but Cattell raised a hand casually. Crack! One effortless strike shattered the skull into splinters, the body collapsing into a pile of bones. He brushed away the fine magical dust from his palm while Alessandro, Kazan, and Kazan were left utterly speechless. Cattell laughed, echoing Kazan's earlier remark that a skeleton stops moving once its head is removed. Kazan chuckled awkwardly, clarifying that he hadn't meant it that way. Skeletons were made of extraordinarily hard bones, unlike normal ones, and even a skilled swordsman would struggle to slice through them in a single strike without aura. This particular skeleton had been reinforced by the dungeon's mana, making it nearly impossible to crush entirely. Yet Cattell had done it effortlessly. The team stared, mouths agape, as the skeleton crumbled into a pile of dust. He observed their disbelief and simply suggested moving on. They all agreed and began running after him, but he told them there was no need to rush. Kazan saluted, while Hayes and Alessandro were just trying not to panic. As they continued, Cattell paused, noticing a skeleton head lying on the floor. Kazan asked why he had stopped, and in that moment, more skeletons began rising from the ground. Hayes, Kazan, and Alessandro readied themselves for combat, but Cattell requested a favor. Curious, they asked what he meant, and he explained he wanted to handle the skeletons alone to test something. They gave him permission, and Hayes agreed without hesitation. Cattell thanked them and slowly approached one skeleton, picking up a sword. The others watched, unsure of his plan, as he muttered in fascination, wondering how the skeleton had assembled itself. The skeleton lunged at Cattell, sword raised, swinging violently. Cattell caught the blade between his fingers and snapped it effortlessly, teasing the creature about what it would do next. Undeterred, the skeleton pulled back its broken weapon, leapt from the wall, and swung again. Cattell stepped aside just enough for the strike to nick his hair, his eyes gleaming with excitement as he grabbed the skeleton's wrist and pulverized it into dust, letting the hand drop to the floor. Confused, the skeleton glared up at him, spun the sword in the air, and caught it with its left hand. Cattell laughed, noting its cleverness in switching to its offhand. The skeleton charged again, wielding the sword in reverse grip, but Cattell seized its wrist once more, tearing the arm clean off. Stumbling backward, the skeleton regained its balance and attempted a follow-up attack with its broken wrist. Cattell caught it again and crushed it, marveling at the skeleton's intelligence. Hayes looked horrified at how casually Cattell toyed with it, while Alessandro and Kazan stared wide-eyed, stunned by his fascination and ease in handling the relentless undead. Cattell began smashing at the skeleton, sending its skull clattering to the floor. He glared down at it, remarking that it couldn't move without a head, and then stomped on it, muttering that this was surprisingly entertaining. He looked up and asked if he had kept them waiting, apologizing for the delay. Kazan waved it off, insisting he take his time, and Cattell thanked him. Moving past another pile of dust, he announced he was ready to continue, and the group followed closely behind. They reached a landing, and Kazan pointed out that it led to the second floor. As they started down the stairs, he suggested a brief rest. Cattell considered it and agreed, prompting Kazan to bow in thanks. They settled in, the silence thick with awkwardness, until Cattell admitted he had a question about the dungeon. Hayes asked what it was, and he confessed that his knowledge of dungeons was lacking. She reassured him that wanting to learn was a virtue and offered to help, admitting she wasn't an expert herself. Grateful, Cattell asked about the proximity of the dungeon to the territory, and whether that posed any issues with the monsters inside. Hayes explained that monsters typically stayed within the dungeon, though exceptions existed and were dealt with beforehand. Kazan added that dungeons were natural phenomena, sometimes forming as caves or towers, and often appearing near populated areas. Cattell nodded, understanding why this one was so close, and Hayes continued, describing how the local lord assessed danger levels and deployed mercenaries, guards, or adventurers like them to clear newly manifested dungeons. Cattell tilted his head, intrigued, and asked if dungeons never manifested inside the territory. Hayes confirmed they always appeared at a distance. Cattell nodded thoughtfully and asked if there was a reward for clearing them. Hayes explained that defeating the boss on the final floor usually earns substantial rewards, and for a dungeon this size, it would be significant. Cattell laughed, remarking that it sounded just like a game, then admitted he had been speaking to himself. He paused, then asked another question that had been on his mind. Who actually creates these dungeons? Hayes blinked, confused, reminding him that dungeons occurred naturally. Cattell pointed out too many oddities to accept that. They always appeared near populated areas, seemingly inviting exploration, tempting adventurers with treasure. Hayes hesitated, realizing he had never questioned it before, and even Kazan admitted he hadn't considered it. It was simply accepted as natural order. They all wondered how a barbarian could challenge such an unquestioned truth, given that barbarians were assumed to be ignorant and savage, devoid of wisdom. By all appearances, Cattell clearly did not fit that stereotype. Chuckling, he called the situation interesting before checking if everyone had rested enough. They sat up, affirming they were ready, and Cattell declared it was time to continue their journey. Alessandro agreed, and the group continued deeper into the second floor. Cattell soon spotted a chest on the ground and asked what it was. Kazan explained it was a treasure chest, one of the maze's rewards, but unlocking one of this quality required a master rogue, something unlikely to be found in this dungeon. Cattell immediately turned to Kazan, insisting he open it. Kazan froze, wondering why Cattell was asking him. Cattell reminded him that as a rogue, handling treasure chests was his duty, and therefore he was asking him to do it. Kazan acknowledged the logic, but internally panicked. Someone like him, a lowly porter unrecognized by the guild, had no real lockpicking skills. Telling the truth would only disappoint Cattell, whose excitement was infectious. He cringed at the thought of failing, recalling how Cattell had pulverized the skeletons effortlessly, and shivered at the thought of ending up like them. Still, outwardly he laughed awkwardly and promised to try. As he fiddled with the lock, he muttered that failure might cost him his life. Cattell found the whole situation fascinating. Kazan strained to recall every technique he had ever glimpsed while working as a porter for others. Nothing came easily, but he steeled himself, thinking he would have to risk everything, his life, his very bloodline, on remembering just enough to succeed. Kazan suddenly stiffened, trembling with excitement. Keto noticed and asked what was wrong. Kazan burst into tears of joy, exclaiming that he had actually opened the chest. He admitted he liked this barbarian. Hayes shared his excitement, amazed that someone so seemingly unskilled could unlock a treasure chest that normally required a master thief. Keto nodded in approval, calling it impressive. Kazan admitted it had seemed impossible and reflected on how, despite always striving to do his best, he had never truly tested his limits before this moment. Curious about the rewards, Keto asked their value. Hayes explained that the contents could support a regular family comfortably for a month, or allow them to live quite luxuriously. Keto laughed, and told Kazan to take care of the loot. Kazan carefully lifted a chalice from the chest, completely captivated, when Keto called out to him, causing him to scream in shock. When Keto asked if he was hurt, Kazan simply shook his head, leaving the others slightly baffled. Later, as the group continued through the dungeon, Kazan could be seen carrying a sack brimming with treasures, a proud smile on his face. Keto called for everyone to stop as 4 skeletons assembled from the bones ahead. He announced that he would take on 3 of them, leaving the last one for the others. Kazan groaned, realizing the fight ahead would be serious, while Alessandro and Hayes readied themselves. As the skeletons began to rise, Kazan shivered at the eerie sight of bones reassembling. Keto told the group to prepare, and a golden aura from Hayes' buff enveloped Alessandro and Kazan. Keto signaled the start of the fight. Kazan charged, swinging at a skeleton's neck, but it wasn't enough. When the others moved to surround him, Keto grabbed 3 of them effortlessly, pulling them aside and joking that this was a rare spectacle they shouldn't interrupt, letting the team handle the remaining one. One skeleton swung its sword at Alessandro, who blocked it with his shield. Kazan leapt from the wall to strike from behind while Hayes cast Shadow of Confusion, enhancing Alessandro with a powerful golden glow. Alessandro dashed forward, slicing through the skeleton's neck. The creature fell to its knees but remained alive, prompting laughter from both the skeleton and Keto, who had already dispatched the other 3. He crushed one skull in his hand, remarking that watching a party's core skills in action was rare and impressive. Kazan went in for a follow-up attack, and the group realized that Keto was orchestrating the battle as a test of their abilities. The lone skeleton on the floor looked terrified and bewildered as the 3 pressed in, aware that showing weakness could mean instant death. At least, that's what they thought Keto might do. They struck relentlessly, and its skull finally collapsed to the ground. Alessandro sank to his knees from exhaustion, followed by Kazan and Hayes, all spent but alive. Keto remarked that the ones who had accompanied Mina must have been truly formidable. As they ascended to the third floor, more skeletons appeared, their numbers swelling, yet with Keto leading the way, the group advanced with little difficulty. Eventually, they reached the dungeon's deepest chamber, where a skeleton sat upon a throne. Hayes gasped, shocked that something like this existed, while Keto asked if it differed from the others. They explained that it was much stronger, a skeleton knight, wielding a long sword and shield, far beyond their capacity to defeat. Keto inquired what would happen if they failed and had to retreat. Hayes explained that such a decision would need confirmation from the territory, but if justified, it would be accepted without issue. Smiling, Keto began walking forward. Confused, Hayes asked why, and Keto replied confidently that defeating it was the only reasonable choice. The skeleton knight stirred and slowly rose, drawing Keto's attention. He commented on how fascinating it was for a skeleton to maintain its form. Lowering into a battle stance, it prompted Hayes to warn the group and summon a barrier to block its wide-reaching attack. The shield began cracking under the force, her face tightening as the attack pierced through. Alessandro raised his shield just in time, taking the brunt for everyone, and crashed to the floor under the impact. Keto observed curiously while Alessandro gasped at the sheer strength, realizing this foe was far beyond their normal limits. The skeleton knight glared at Keto and charged. As it neared, Keto struck its chest with a single, devastating blow, erasing its torso into dust. The three teammates sat frozen in disbelief while Keto brushed the remains off his hands, casually asking if that was all. Tension still hung in the air as Keto then noticed the chest and called to Kazan. Confused, Kazan asked what he wanted. Keto requested him to unlock it, but Kazan admitted it was impossible, the lock far too intricate for his skills. Keto simply remarked it was a shame, and Kazan echoed the sentiment, still staring at the chest in reluctant awe. Before Kazan could even finish speaking, Keto strode up and shattered the treasure chest with a single punch. The others stared in disbelief, though by now, it wasn't surprising. Keto remarked that the rewards were better this way and told Kazan to handle them. Kazan nodded, still stunned that someone could just smash a chest open, and silently wondered why Keto had asked him to unlock it in the first place. As they exited the dungeon, a bright light signaled its disappearance, accompanied by a low rumble behind them. Kazan explained that clearing a dungeon perfectly caused it to vanish and that secret rooms, though rare, sometimes existed. Keto laughed, finding the process amusing, while Hayes simply wondered what kind of psycho he really was. Back at the guard captain, he couldn't believe they had finished so quickly. Clearing his throat, he asked how it had gone. Keto grinned, calling it satisfying. The captain said they would now proceed with the entry procedure, having the group follow one by one. Hayes assured him there had been no major issues, and when asked if it was acceptable for a barbarian like Keto to stay, she confirmed it would be fine, though she hesitated slightly when mentioning him. The captain explained that the dungeon test wasn't only for practice, it was meant to weed out troublemakers. Kazan remarked that Keto didn't seem like the type to cause problems, and the captain agreed, noting that despite his monstrous strength, Keto had caused no harm to the party and was far from a typical barbarian. Keto praised Kazan, noting how well he had disarmed traps and even unlocked a treasure chest, while Alessandro had proven himself a reliable frontline warrior, and Hayes' prayers had greatly aided their battle. The guard captain raised an eyebrow, commenting on how unusual it was for forced parties to speak so kindly of each other, then handed them their rewards. Normally, some of the dungeon loot would be taken by the guards, but he wasn't in the mood to test Keto. Keto told the group to divide the spoils fairly, but they insisted they didn't want any. He laughed, reminding them that since they had worked together as a team, the rewards had to be shared. Reluctantly, they agreed, and Keto suggested celebrating with a drink at a pub. While Keto practically bounced with excitement, the others trailed behind. The captain shook his head in awe, noting that for a barbarian to defeat a skeleton knight with a single strike, he had to be at least knight level, an existence far beyond any typical barbarian. Recognizing the extraordinary nature of Keto, he told the other guards he needed to report to the Lord and left them on duty. At the Lord's estate, a knock brought an invitation to enter. The Lord Luke Barkin asked what had brought him here, and the guard captain explained that a barbarian had appeared in their domain. Luke Farkin asked if permission had been granted, and the first captain explained he judged it wouldn't cause major issues. Luke pressed for the problem, and the captain admitted it wasn't just a minor concern. Keto was incredibly strong. When asked how strong, he described how Keto had defeated a skeleton knight with a single strike, a feat no one below knight level could achieve. Luke's eyes widened at the news, noting that barbarians were usually simple-minded, relying only on brute strength. The captain suggested it was highly probable that Keto was a first-rate warrior, and when Luke asked if he could be even stronger, the captain conceded it was possible. Luke muttered about the headaches such a barbarian-level warrior could cause in the territory and ordered the captain to summon him. The captain hesitated, warning of the danger, but Luke reassured him that his own knight would be there to maintain safety. Surprised the captain hadn't noticed him before, Luke asked for his opinion. The knight admitted that despite some skill, he expected a barbarian, an unrefined, ignorant brute, to amount to nothing, even with swordsmanship learned from a master. Luke nodded and instructed the captain to bring Keto to speak with him personally. Meanwhile, back at the pub, Keto was devouring food with reckless abandon, leaving Kaysen, Hayes, and Aleandro staring in mixed disgust and disbelief at his voracious appetite. Keto slammed his ale onto the table, grinning as he praised the flavor and the quiet, cozy atmosphere, declaring it his treat and inviting the others to eat as much as they wanted. Aleandro, Hayes, and Kaysen laughed awkwardly as Keto leaned forward, asking Aleandro if he was truly a paladin. Aleandro confirmed it, and Keto inquired about his divine powers, noting he hadn't seen any during the dungeon. Aleandro admitted he was still in training, his abilities not yet awakened, which Keto found disappointing. Turning to Hayes, he asked about her god and whether there was a nearby temple. She explained her deity, the god of lies and deceit, was shunned and had no temple nearby. Nervously, she asked Keto just how strong he was. Innocently, he replied that he had recently left home and was curious about the strength of a skeleton knight. They explained he'd need to be at least second-rate to face one, though a first-rate warrior could defeat it like he had. Keto tilted his head, asking if second-rate was truly that strong. At that moment, a nervous waiter reminded them the shop was closing. Keto apologized and asked if they had plans afterward, but each hurriedly claimed they were far too busy to spend time with him. Shrugging, he said it was a pity and hoped to see them again, though none of them were keen on meeting him a second time. Later, Keto found a comfortable inn and collapsed onto a bed, relieved it was the first time he could rest since arriving, and grateful that the dungeon rewards allowed him to afford a proper room without any trouble. Compared to the endless snowy plains, Keto felt like he had stepped into a paradise. Since leaving the snowfield, it had been a long time before he set foot in civilized lands, and now he wondered what to do next, eager to experience more, to feel more, to truly have an adventure. He imagined exploring the sacred grounds of the elves, ascending the magic tower, visiting the royal capital, everything a fantasy world had to offer, and he could hardly wait. As he drifted into sleep, sunlight streamed through the window, warming the room. When he awoke, wiping drool from his face, a knock came at the door. The first captain apologized for waking him and explained that Luke Varkin wished to see Keto personally. Keto chuckles at the thought of being summoned by the lord of the territory, calling it a surprisingly cool invitation and saying he's more than ready. He asks if they should leave immediately, and if so, he'll quickly grab his clothes before heading out. The first captain can't help but wonder if this is really the right man. Keto seems far too casual about the whole thing. As they move through the city, Keto's eyes wander, recalling how he only got a vague impression of it at night, and now, in daylight, it looks completely different. He grins, calling the city fascinating, almost like something out of a game. The captain quietly frets about wasting time sightseeing and prefers a quicker route, but Keto is utterly engrossed. They arrive at the lord's estate, and the captain announces that he has brought the barbarian. Luke Varkin gestures them inside, stretching out a hand in greeting and introducing himself as the lord of the territory. Keto returns the greeting politely, bowing his head, a gesture so unexpected that Luke is momentarily stunned, aware that barbarians rarely show respect in such a manner. He muses that surviving long enough must teach even the fiercest warriors a measure of manners, and he invites Keto to sit. Opposite him, Keto settles in, eyes sweeping the room with awe. The grandeur of the lord's castle leaves him impressed. Castles have always fascinated him. Spotting the knight stationed nearby, Keto's expression lights up with childlike excitement, recalling his games imagining knights and never expecting to see a real one. The knight, however, narrows his eyes, sensing an unusual aura, bloodlust rather than curiosity, and immediately recognizes that such intensity in the lord's presence is highly irregular. Luke realizes he'll have to deal with him carefully and mutters that Keto is foolish, claiming he won't leave alive. He explains that the reason for summoning him is simple. There are just a few things he wants to verify before letting him go. Keto waves him off, telling him to go ahead and ask. Luke begins with the obvious, where he comes from. Keto replies casually that it's an important question to them and that he hails from the coldest place in the world, a land covered entirely in white. Both Luke and his knight freeze in surprise, realizing that the legendary barbarian is truly standing before them. Luke admits his disbelief, and Keto shrugs, saying it was a miserable place, leaving them to believe it or not as they wish. Luke rephrases, wanting to know how strong he is, as what matters is the danger his power represents. Keto laughs softly, calling that the wrong question. He doesn't even know the strength standards of this land. Luke nods and glances at his knight, who immediately understands. Then he proposes a sparring match with his knight, promising a worthy reward. Keto's eyes light up with excitement, and he asks what it would entail. Luke reassures him it's not to the death, and trusts he'll fight reasonably. Keto laughs loudly, thrilled. Sparring with a knight in this world, with their mystical powers and aura, is exactly the kind of adventure he's been waiting for. The opportunity to study a true knight's techniques up close fills him with excitement. Luke tightens his grip on the armrest, muttering that a barbarian is still a barbarian. No matter how polite they act, their savage love of battle can't be hidden. He's uneasy, and the laughter from Keto only unsettles him further. They make their way to the Colosseum, Luke watching from above as the barbarian and the knight face off in a tense stare-down. He whispers, hoping no blood is shed. The bell rings, and the knight tells Keto to consider it an honor to witness his swordsmanship. Keto beams, thrilled, while the knight frowns, irritated by his opponent's casual attitude and determined to demonstrate the overwhelming difference in strength. He charges, a green aura flaring around him, and asks Keto what he intends to do. As he swings, 3 spectral blades project outward from his sword, aiming directly for Keto's head. Keto blinks at the 3 spectral blades hurtling toward him, asking why there are 3. He wonders if it's an illusion, but with a swift movement, he dodges all of them, realizing they are all real. He tilts his head, curious if this is what the knight calls swordsmanship. The knight narrows his eyes, acknowledging that dodging is impressive but clearly insufficient. As he strikes again, Keto lifts his hand slowly, flicking his finger to shatter the knight's blade. The knight freezes, aghast, as Keto presses a hand to his chest, clenching his fist. His armor wrinkles violently, his chest plate bursts, and he sends the knight flying, blood spilling from his mouth. The impact smashes the wall behind him, and the ground cracks from the force of the slide. Luke leans forward, stunned that his top-tier knight was defeated in a single strike. Keto turns casually, asking if that's all, while Luke swallows hard, trying to maintain composure, internally panicking at the sheer power in front of him. He clears his throat, mumbling assent, knowing this barbarian is beyond normal human limits, superhuman at the very least, and likely far more. The true depth of Keto's power is unknowable, capable of shaking the world's balance, and Luke knows this must be reported to one of the few who holds the title of Sword Master. The Sword Master should be arriving soon, and he wonders if this barbarian will pique his interest. Back in his room, the window slides open and an old man peers in. Luke sighs, muttering that his hobbies are as distasteful as ever. The old man, Cain, replies that he must have some fun and asks if Luke will finally explain the matter that supposedly interests him. Luke rises from his chair, bowing deeply, greeting him as Lord Cain. Cain's gaze is sharp as Luke bows, his knight stirring awake in the infirmary, shirt torn and battered. Luke checks on him, and the knight assures he'll be fine, apologizing for failing. Cain shakes his head, saying he should be the one apologizing for his foolish student being bested by a nameless barbarian. His eyes sweep the knight's body, noting there's not a single scratch. The shattered armor could have meant death, yet the knight is untouched beyond some torn clothes. Cain realizes the barbarian must have shown mercy, not a mindless brute but someone who controls immense power with precision. Surpassing knight-level strength yet holding back indicates he is truly superhuman. Luke and the knight exchange stunned looks as Cain clears his throat, asking how this barbarian compares to him. Cain remarks that no matter how strong the barbarian may be, he remains a sword master. Even wielding superhuman strength, he would be no match. Luke chuckles in agreement, but Cain notes that the barbarian seemed to exert such power without using aura, which should be impossible by normal means, and wonders if this is the unique might of someone from the White Wasteland. Luke admits that he initially doubted the stories, but now it seems certain that this is the legendary barbarian of the Wasteland. Cain ponders the tale of a fabled human from the icy plains, or perhaps he is something else entirely, a monster in human form. Yet he dismisses the thought, reasoning that if he were truly something else, he wouldn't have shown mercy to a human. Cain is puzzled why someone from the White Wasteland would appear at this moment, but brushes it off, noting it is a matter for another time. The Emperor is known for peculiar requests. He asks if the barbarian is still here, and Luke confirms that he should be, as he planned to stay. Kane then decides he must meet the barbarian himself. Captain asks Keatle what his next move is, and Keatle admits he hasn't figured it out yet. He mentions that the Lord has already rewarded him for the duel and promised not to intervene in his activities within this territory. Keatle adds that he doesn't have a concrete plan, though it would be convenient to have some official recognition, since constantly entering dungeons every time he moves into a new area could be problematic. Captain suggests one solution: having a high-ranking individual act as a sponsor and verify his identity. Curious, Keatle asks about the alternative, and Captain explains that he could become a mercenary. By completing missions and gaining recognition from the guild, his status could eventually be formalized. However, he warns that most mercenaries, before reaching a certain level, are essentially just grunt-level operatives. Captain, recalling his own time as a mercenary, notes that with Keatle's abilities, finding a sponsor would likely be the simpler path. Keatle is surprised there's such an option, imagining the life of a mercenary who takes on monster hunting requests, an almost dreamlike fantasy. Eager, he asks where he should go to start this path. Captain points him toward the guild hall, and Keatle asks if he could accompany him. The captain, intrigued, questions why Keatle wants to become a mercenary and explains the reality. Mercenaries may seem romantic to outsiders, but those without status occupy the very bottom of society. Even moderately skilled mercenaries often perish attempting to clear unknown dungeons, and many are forced into menial or dangerous work. The lower ranks of the mercenary world are filthy, chaotic, and dishonorable. Inside the guild hall, a fight breaks out as one man slaps another to the ground. The fallen man quickly rises, challenging his opponent, who responds eagerly. Onlookers start placing bets, while a receptionist watches with a weary sigh. Her colleague asks about the new recruits, and she, Rosa, groans, commenting that they're all odd, including a lunatic claiming to be a paladin. The others seem like rogues, and the nun appears decent, but because of her allegiance, no one really trusts her, and she carries an air of defeat. Her coworker mutters that it's disappointing, and Rosa sighs, lamenting that not a single competent person has passed through. She complains about the brawny mercenaries picking fights all day and jokes that she wishes a handsome prince on a white horse would come to rescue her from the monotony of her desk job. Just then, the door opens, and she perks up, spotting Keatle, who asks if this is the guild hall. The fighting stops, and everyone turns to stare, murmuring if a barbarian has really entered the mercenary guild. Keatle is thrilled to be there, explaining that he's come to become a mercenary. Rosa, startled, asks why he wants to take this path. He explains there are several reasons, including the hope of having his status officially recognized. She confirms that's true but warns him that gaining recognition requires completing numerous accomplishments, asking if he's prepared for that. He assures her he is, and she agrees to register him as a mercenary for 5 copper coins, asking for his name and age. Keatle gives his name but is unsure of his age, so she decides to write something reasonable. She then hands him his registration and mercenary badge, emphasizing that it symbolizes his status and must not be lost. Keatle examines it with wide-eyed excitement, like a child on Christmas morning. Eager, he asks what kinds of jobs are available and if he can start immediately. Rosa clarifies that they're called requests, not jobs, and shows him the ones he can currently take. He glances at the list and seems disappointed, seeing only tasks like herb gathering, cleaning basements, clearing sewers, sweeping streets, and night patrols. She explains that as a rookie mercenary, these are the only requests he's eligible for. Rosa worries quietly, knowing barbarians tend to be proud and fearing Keatle might overreact. She hopes that by starting with simpler tasks and building his record, he'll eventually qualify for the more challenging requests. Keatle confidently volunteers for the herb gathering task, pointing to it without hesitation. She confirms he's sure, and he nods, saying he has no problem with it. She explains that the herbs grow just outside the village and shows him a reference drawing. Keatle announces he'll head out immediately, and Rosa can't help but be surprised at his calm, easygoing attitude. While her coworker panics at the sight heading into the woods, Keatle quickly finds the herbs matching the illustration. He remarks that they're good for treating wounds, though they look a bit unusual. Removing his shirt, he says he's prepared with some UV protection gear and begins his first job as a mercenary. About an hour later, he returns with a full bag, asking if it's enough. Rosa is impressed, noting it's a large haul, and briefly wonders if he's some criminal mastermind here to ruin the herb field. Examining the herbs, she realizes they're in excellent condition, most inexperienced gatherers would have ruined them, lowering their value. Keto smiles, insisting that despite appearances, he has a careful touch. She nods in understanding and thanks him for his effort, handing him his reward, 1 silver coin. Though barely enough for the cheapest meal, it's his first earnings from honest work, and Keto is overjoyed. Immediately, he asks for another request, much to Rosa's disbelief at his enthusiasm, even as a barbarian. Keto explains that with the sun still high, he wants to complete as much work as possible. Rosa shakes her head, wondering why he's so happy, and mutters that this new recruit is a weirdo too. Keto decides to take on the next task, noting it's part 2 of the cleaning assignments, but it's clear he's already marked off several other requests. Rosa observes that after herb gathering, this is his 3rd cleaning job in a row and wonders if he secretly enjoys it, telling him he should go ahead. Keto heads to the warehouse and announces he's there to clean. A woman inside panics at the sight, and he asks if she's the owner. She confirms she is, still puzzled why a barbarian has come for such work. The warehouse cleaning turns out to be straightforward. Nothing heavy needs moving, and the following street cleaning task only requires a broom. At first, controlling his strength is challenging, but Keto manages it with steady effort. Unbeknownst to him, someone spies from a distance. Kane, wearing a bizarre outfit, wonders what on earth Keto is doing. He recognizes Keto as clearly superhuman, a person capable of shaking an entire kingdom if he chose to. Just by showing his power, Keto could earn respect anywhere, yet here he is, a barbarian, tackling menial chores with full seriousness and dedication. Kane can't fathom why Keto approaches this work with such genuine care. Meanwhile, Keto simply enjoys the tasks. The next morning, birds chirp as he wakes, and stepping out of bed, he notices a pouch on his bedside table. Inside are rewards from his work yesterday. Rosa had praised him for his first day as a mercenary, noting that he completed 15 requests in total, each granting 1 silver coin. By the end of the day, Keto has earned a total of 15 silver coins, marking his first real earnings through honest work. Keto muses that he must have acquired the qualifications necessary to even venture into such places. His thoughts expand as he considers other dangerous regions, the White Snowfield, demon zones, and lands hostile to humans, teeming with twisted, alien creatures. There aren't just a few. This world contains 5 vast demon zones: the Silent Forest, which kills all life in eerie stillness; the Abyss, which drags all it touches toward evil; the Deep Sea, where primates survive under strange conditions; the Hollowing Pit, where nothing exists; and the White Snowfield. Within these zones dwell terrifying monsters known as aberrations, though they cannot cross into human territory. Keto reflects on the enormity of the world, noting that the White Snowfield alone is immense, and there are several regions of similar scale. Satisfied that he's gathered all the information available in the books, he thanks the librarian profusely, and she responds warmly. He returns to the Mercenary Guild and asks Rosa what requests are available today. Startled by his energy, she hands him the request forms, and Keto greets them with excitement. Watching from afar, Kane shakes his head in disbelief, muttering that Keto is bizarre and that he will need to confront him directly. That night, as Keto walks home, he reflects that he's completed another dozen or so requests, noting that even the small ones add up, making the work surprisingly rewarding. He thinks that the day he's recognized as a true mercenary will come soon enough. Around a corner, Kane waits, and as Keto approaches, he steps out. Keto casually remarks that he knows he's been followed all day, leaving Kane shocked that he noticed. Keto asks what he wants, and Kane notes that he has been suppressing his presence entirely, making detection nearly impossible, no matter how keen the senses. Assuming he might be a bandit, Keto instinctively starts covering his gold. Kane is baffled by the thought. Keto reasons that since Kane isn't answering, his suspicion might be correct, even though the town's security seems adequate. Kane denies it, admitting he wouldn't even know whether to believe Keto if he claimed to be a source master. Without warning, Keto strikes, telling him that robbing at such an old age is pathetic, and that the economy must be worse than he expected. Keto muses that taking him down and turning him in could make a solid mercenary record. Kane, puzzled but seeing an opportunity to test Keto, decides confronting him directly is the best way to assess his strength and identity. Keto begins walking forward, causing Kane to tense. Suddenly, Keto wobbles slightly and vanishes right before him, reappearing instantly in front of Kane. Stretching toward him, Keto comments casually that it's not bad at all. Kane evades the reach, keeping his distance and muttering that he almost got caught. If his reflexes had been even slightly slower, he'd have been grabbed. What shocks him more is that he couldn't sense a single trace of Keto's aura. Keto remarks that it's interesting, leaving Kane stunned. He can't believe Keto moved that fast using only a human body. Shaking off his previous assumptions, Kane decides to treat this as a real fight and charges in at full force. Keto readies himself, vanishes again, and seizes Kane's arm. Kane tries to expand his perception but still cannot react. Keto begins bending Kane's wrist, and Kane realizes this isn't just a grab, it's as if his arm is jammed into solid rock, his entire body being dragged along. Screaming in shock at Keto's strength, Kane admits that in terms of raw power, the fight isn't even close, and he must release his full strength. As Kane's aura surges outward, Keto senses it and is momentarily surprised by its intensity. A burst of green aura explodes, and Kane is forced to put distance between them as Keto holds the aura in his hand. Kane readies himself for the next strike, but Keto casually comments that bandits these days really know all kinds of tricks. Kane can't believe it. After everything, Keto still thinks he's just a bandit. Kane realizes that Keto is manifesting mana at a level only the elite can achieve, cloaking his entire body in it, and he cannot fathom why someone like him would even be a bandit. He's stunned that Keto genuinely believes this. Reflecting on the situation, Kane notes that his own manifested mana, capable of cutting through solid steel, should have obliterated a human body on contact, yet Keto remains completely unharmed. Bewildered, Kane wonders what kind of body can endure such power without using any of its own. Keto shrugs, saying he doesn't know what trick Kane is using, but it's time to end things. Kane reaches for his blade, only to be stunned as Keto closes the distance in an instant, stopping him from drawing it with a single finger. Despite his efforts, Kane finds his movements futile, the hilt of his sword bending under pressure. Panic sets in as Keto stretches his hand further, and Kane, shedding a single tear, mutters that this is the end. A short while later, Keto remarks that sure was interesting as he casually carries Kane over his shoulder, still in disbelief that a so-called bandit in this fantasy world could possess such extraordinary techniques. Later, the guard captain gapes in disbelief as Keto casually holds Kane up in the air like a dog he caught in his yard. He wonders why Kane is here at all, and what could have led to this situation. Keto explains that he caught a bandit. The captain can hardly believe it, and Keto adds that if he turns him in, it should count toward his mercenary record, asking if that's correct. The captain is at a loss, struggling to comprehend the scene. A man of the highest superhuman skill has been captured by a barbarian in such a humiliating way. The captain formally bows, addressing Kane as the Sword Master, the only Sword Master in the kingdom. Keto looks down, confused, while Kane refuses to meet his gaze. Keto questions why a Sword Master would pretend to be a bandit, and accuses him of trying to steal his silver coins. The captain insists he would never mistake the face of a true Sword Master. Keto speculates that perhaps he is a mage using illusion magic, but the captain counters that any mage capable of such deception would already be as respected as a Sword Master. Still bewildered, Keto asks if Sword Master is just a fancy term for bandit, prompting the captain to demand what he's talking about. Silence hangs awkwardly until Keto asks once more if he's really the Sword Master, and the captain confirms it. Keto begins to experience an existential crisis. The captain announces he will report this to the Lord. Luke slams his table, yelling in shock that Sir Kane has truly been defeated. Keto apologizes, saying he should have allowed Kane to explain, while Kane quietly takes responsibility for not speaking up. A tense silence follows. Luke struggles to understand the events. He expected Kane to challenge the barbarian to a duel, but instead Kane lost. Though he doesn't know the details, it's clear the barbarian is stronger. Among superhumans, Kane is still relatively new and likely on the lower end, yet as a Sword Master, he holds the noble title of Master of the Sword, making his defeat all the more astonishing. Keto's victory leaves Kane completely unmanageable, and Luke rubs his temples in frustration. Realizing there's been a misunderstanding, Luke decides to excuse himself, suggesting the two settle things on their own, and leaves. Keto watches him go while Kane sweats nervously, acknowledging the humiliation of his perfect defeat. His pride isn't merely bruised, it feels shredded, like a tattered rag. He sets his teacup down and formally introduces himself to Keto. Curious, Keto asks if Sword Master is his surname. Kane explains that once someone reaches his level, surnames lose all meaning. Intrigued, Keto presses to know what the technique he demonstrated was. Kane, surprised by his interest, begins to manifest his aura, asking if this is what he means. Keto's excitement grows. Initially, He assumed it was just a bandit's trick, but now knowing it's a sword master skill, he's deeply fascinated. Kane explains that it's the embodiment of the arcane, also called aura. Overjoyed to witness aura from someone so prestigious in this fantasy world, Keto eagerly asks if he can learn to use it. Kane tells him that to do so, he must first learn to manifest it by controlling the arcane. Keto asks if the arcane is like mana. Kane explains that the arcane is the mystical energy itself. When wielded as aura, one becomes a swordsman. When channeled as mana, one becomes a mage. Fascinated, Keto remarks on how both types of people use it and earnestly asks Kane to teach him, admitting he's embarrassingly lacking in knowledge and wants to make up for it. He even adds a polite please. Kane agrees but hesitates, wondering if the barbarian truly needs guidance since he's stronger than him. Keto admits he knows nothing about the arcane or swordsmanship and just swings blindly. Kane pauses, then resolutely says that although he lost, he didn't even draw his sword. He decides to teach Keto the way of the sword, hoping to show his greatness and help him reclaim his shattered pride. He emphasizes that without a sword, he is only half a man. Keto, excited, nods in understanding, realizing that Kane's weakness was simply due to not drawing his sword. Kane, feeling a bit humbled, confirms that's exactly the case. Keto remarks that to be called a sword master at that level, something seemed off. Had Kane used his sword, he might have even won. Kane, however, is unsure. As Keto eagerly anticipates their upcoming lessons, Kane quietly wonders if his self-esteem will ever recover, sensing that the barbarian's growth may continue to leave him feeling more insecure. Keto explains that before arriving here, he had already learned swordsmanship, though this is real fantasy swordsmanship, a strange form that manipulates arcane aura, and exactly the kind he wants to master. Kane tells him that the hallmark of his swordsmanship is the embodiment of the illusion of reality, asking if he noticed it when he fought Kane's disciple. Keto admits he hadn't realized that Knight was a disciple, but now that it's mentioned, he recalls the sword splitting into three, all appearing real. He muses that this embodiment seems more skill-based than reliant on strength. Kane confirms, explaining that swordsmanship is the art of fusing sword and aura to wield the arcane, and one who masters this path becomes a sword master. Kane begins to infuse his sword with aura, and Keto reacts with visible excitement, marveling at it. Though still in disbelief, Kane decides that to teach barbarian swordsmanship properly, he must give it his all. He acknowledges that the embodiment of illusion of reality sounds abstract, so he resolves to demonstrate directly. Locking in, Kane swings his aura-imbued sword, shattering the ground with the attack, but then the strike splits into 5 separate arcs. Keto watches in awe, surprised that the strike actually divided and even reached the far side of the room. Kane notes that while many techniques create illusions using aura, only his swordsmanship can give those illusions real substance. Keto points to the technique, and Kane asks if he's impressed. Keto confidently replies that he feels he could do it too. Kane is bewildered, questioning such nonsense. He devoted his entire life to the sword, combining innate talent with relentless effort, and only barely achieved mastery. There's no way someone could replicate it from a single observation. Keto shrugs, saying it's faster to demonstrate, and grabs what turns out to be an axe. He widens his stance, raises it behind him, and begins a flurry of strikes. Kane watches, astonished, but clarifies that this isn't the technique he showed, it's pure brute force. Yet Keto mirrors the path of the attack perfectly, amplified by raw strength and speed, creating a massive explosion. Smoke rises from the axe as Keto turns to ask for Kane's opinion. Kane admits it closely resembles the original attack, though the resemblance is due to overwhelming force rather than technique. He almost feels tricked for a moment. Keto points out that swordsmanship is meant for real combat, and as long as the result is achieved, that's what matters. Kane begrudgingly acknowledges it but feels his pride wounded. Deciding to escalate, Kane demonstrates bodily separation, splitting himself into multiple forms and unleashing a massive aura attack that detonates in a huge explosion. He asks Keto if he can replicate it. Keto steps aside, raises his axe, and begins his attempt, generating shadowy figures as he strives to copy the technique, testing himself against this extraordinary display of aura mastery. Kane watches in shock as the shadowy figures from Keto's axe replicate his technique, forming a swirling tornado of purple aura that obliterates the surrounding area. Dropping to his knees, he cries out that this represents a lifetime of effort, and he can't believe his swordsmanship has been rendered so ineffective. Gasping, he clutches his chest, as if suffering a heart attack. Keto casually remarks that Kane's mental state is fragile, comparing it to toilet paper, before adding that his swordsmanship is still impressive. Looking up, Kane listens as Ketil explains that what he did was simply swinging an axe with speed. It wasn't true swordsmanship. The technique Kane demonstrated wasn't a mere afterimage, it was real, but Ketil's speed and instinct far surpassed normal limits. Kane stifles his tears, acknowledging that his swordsmanship retains its value and uniqueness, yet the problem is the sheer lunacy of Ketil, a human moving fast enough to blur without using aura. Stunned, Kane is asked by Ketil if he could teach him the true meaning of technique. Kane freezes, admitting he allowed his emotions to get the better of him, and apologizes. Kane clears his throat and begins, explaining that to use true technique, one must first master aura control, and to control aura, one must first understand the arcane. No mage or swordsman can reach the higher realms without awakening it, except those who draw power directly from the gods. Ketil asks if divine power is something separate, and Kane confirms that miracles flow directly from the gods and are unrelated to personal ability. Intrigued, Ketil listens as Kane elaborates. The arcane is the mysterious power within oneself, and how it is wielded determines all outcomes. Ketil realizes that to use aura, access mana, or control spirits, he must first comprehend the arcane. Kane introduces the 5 stages of arcane mastery, beginning with the most basic, arcane perception, the stage of awakening and sensing the arcane. Ketil asks if anyone can feel it, and Kane explains that without talent, one cannot. Those who can sense it are considered third class, the first level in the 5-grade system of arcane handling. Ketil recalls hearing something similar from Marsilia 5 years ago, and wonders if that was what she meant. Kane clarifies that these classifications are only convenient labels. There are vast differences within each class, and the boundaries are blurred. His main goal is simply to ensure Ketil understands the concept. Ketil nods in comprehension, and Kane announces that they will begin with the first step, arcane perception. Kane instructs Ketil to become aware of everything around him. To sense the arcane, he explains, is to awaken a perception previously unknown, expanding one's senses to the fullest. Ketil must feel the wind brushing past him, sense the touch of the earth, and perceive hidden presences moving within the currents. Ketil focuses intently but then snaps out of it, admitting he can't feel anything. Kane is momentarily at a loss, surprised, and asks if he's certain. Typically, someone of Ketil's strength would sense it naturally, even without mana, but perhaps a barbarian is an exception. He wonders if it's a peculiarity of the White Wasteland. Ketil admits he doesn't know and that no one around him has ever sensed anything like the arcane. They lack the capacity entirely. Kane notes that even for most, sensing the arcane is extremely difficult, and he proposes channeling energy directly into Ketil to open the path. Ketil brightens, asking if he will be transferring aura, and Kane confirms it's something like that. Ketil declares he's ready, and Kane instructs him to relax fully, center his senses, and focus on the mana being channeled into him. Kane's body impresses Ketil with its solid, stone-like presence, so unnatural he questions if he is even human. Ketil checks if Kane is okay, and Kane explains his mind wandered, but he is now ready to begin. He tells Ketil they will start with aura flow, emphasizing that the goal is to awaken the arcane path within and locate it. While it's not inherently difficult, Ketil finds he cannot sense or reach the arcane path inside him. Oblivious to the difficulty, he sits there, blissfully confident that it is working. Kane explains that no matter how far he extends his aura, it senses nothing, as if swimming through a crushing abyss. He admits that simply channeling aura into Ketil won't reveal the arcane. The path must be discovered and awakened from within. Ketil wonders if this means he lacks talent, but Kane clarifies that it's not a matter of skill. His aura cannot penetrate deep enough inside Ketil's unusually dense body to reach the arcane. Even confirming its presence is impossible. Ketil asks if that means he can never sense it, and Kane admits he can't be certain. The path may exist, but it remains inaccessible. He suggests seeking guidance from a more experienced sword master or visiting the mage's tower, expressing regret that he cannot help further. Ketil shrugs, content with the small chance that remains, grateful for what he has learned. Kane, still astonished, reflects that every barbarian he's known has been uncontrollable, indulging in violence and vice, and thus cast out by society. But Ketil is different. He tentatively asks if Ketil would consider joining the kingdom. Ketil inquires what he means, and Kane offers him a chance to pledge loyalty, gain rank, and even receive sponsorship to rise high. Ketil finds the offer intriguing but declines, unwilling to be tied down. Kane acknowledges that if they could have him, even the Empire's dominance could be challenged. Kane asks if even a noble rank would tempt Ketil, noting it's a generous offer. Kettle considers briefly but says he'd rather enjoy his freedom. Cain acknowledges that he cannot be controlled and understands. Kettle thanks him, promising never to forget his kindness. Cain shakes his head, thinking it's a shame, and walks away, muttering to himself that he'd been ridiculous to think he could influence Kettle even for a moment. Kettle acts entirely on his own will. He may cooperate, but only within his own thoughts. Not knowing what he's thinking makes him even more unpredictable than other barbarians. A being from the demon realm and a barbarian of the White Wasteland is indeed extraordinary, and Cain sighs at the thought of the Emperor's mad goal to conquer the demon realm. The scene shifts to Luke, being briefed on the situation. He remarks that it sounds absurd. Cain warns that people are dying during reconnaissance, suggesting the Emperor might even be a reincarnated ruler from the past, though it's a matter for the future. Humanity's domain is not yet fully conquered, and the Empire could summon forces anytime, so preparation is crucial. Luke thanks him, and Cain sighs, noting that the world is already in chaos, and now the Emperor's madness only worsens it. Luke asks if the rumors are true. Cain confirms they are. The demons have started to move. Luke looks worried, and Cain adds that unusual dungeon outbreaks suggest the taint of the demon realm is leaking, signaling danger for humans. Yet the strangest presence may already be among them. Luke acknowledges it, saying at least he understands that this entity is not an enemy, but beyond that, he cannot be certain. Naturally, they are speaking of Kettle. Back in town, Kettle walks along the street and notices a small child clinging to his mother, clearly frightened. Another villager quickly hides from him. Kettle wonders if it's his clothes that scare them. A beast hide vest might be practical, he thinks, but it doesn't exactly look civilized. They probably think he's insane and want nothing to do with him. Realizing the misunderstanding, he decides it's time to buy proper clothes. He heads to a clothing store, and the shopkeeper moves to welcome him before freezing in fear. Kettle explains that he wants to buy some clothes. The shopkeeper apologizes, saying nothing in his size is available. Kettle frowns, asking if there's no other way. The worker hesitantly suggests a custom order if he's willing to wait. Kettle agrees eagerly, and the worker worries silently, imagining what might happen if Kettle dislikes the clothes, or worse, if he survives the experience at all. Later, walking to the mercenary guild, Kettle spots a small bead on the ground. Curious, he picks it up, wondering what a gemstone is doing there. It glows brightly, and intrigued, he decides to ask Rosa about it. When he arrives, he shows her the gem, asking if she knows what it is, explaining that he found it on the way there. Rosa examines the glowing orb and says it doesn't look ordinary. Kettle agrees, and she adds that it doesn't seem like a typical gemstone either. Its surface is smooth, almost worked by someone, yet there are no markings or names. Her eyes glaze over as she wonders if it holds any value. Kettle snaps his fingers, bringing her back, and asks if she's all right. She blinks, surprised, and he explains that it looked like she was entranced by the orb. She admits it's strange, feeling a curious energy emanating from it, and asks if he wants it appraised. He thanks her but says he'll handle it himself, it's part of the fun. He then asks about available jobs, and she hands him a request form listing street cleaning, sewer cleaning, weed pulling, and potato digging. Kettle lights up with excitement. That night, his reward pouch rests on his nightstand. He reflects on another fulfilling day but keeps thinking about the orb, wondering why Rosa seems so affected and what its function might be. Suddenly, a voice calls him. He hesitates, unsure if it really spoke, but the voice continues inside his mind, urging him to follow. A map forms in his head, and he wonders if it's some kind of domination magic. Glancing out the window, he decides it probably won't hurt to follow it. He stops walking as he looks up, spotting a cave and wondering if this is the right place. He smiles, noticing glowing eyes of a skeleton. Kettle announces he's here, curious where the voice's body might be. The skeleton remarks that another sacrifice has arrived, this one a foolish barbarian, and notes it's a sizable offering, making 10 so far. It adds that this must be a dream, and perhaps even resurrection is possible. The poor barbarian is in for a world of hurt. Long ago, during the age of great wars when many kingdoms fell, an evil mage manipulated and disturbed the hearts of men. He controlled countless kings, incited wars, and ruled over entire realms. Eventually, his atrocities caught up with him, and heroes hunted him down. But before his downfall, he had transferred his soul into a life vessel, becoming a lich, an undying being so long as the vessel remained intact. The once world-dominating mage began plotting his resurrection. Needing many lives to revive, he settled near a remote area and spread bewitching orbs to lure sacrifices, gradually gathering enough for the Manhwa required to regain power and conquer the world. He chose Kettle's territory for its seclusion, far from public eyes, which made the barbarian's presence unusual. Observing him, the Lich notes the creature from the north shore has traveled far, and his size will make a fine offering. The orb is enchanted to lure only those unawakened to the arcane, meaning anyone drawn in is ignorant of its power. For Kettle to remain unaffected, it must be a fluke. The Lich watches intently, confident the barbarian will become fuel for his resurrection. Kettle finally reaches some heavy doors, murmuring that this must be the place. He steps forward, only to be confronted by the Lich, ready to claim him as an offering. Kettle blinks, asking if it's really a Lich, the kind of ultimate fantasy villain that exists only in tales in the realm of mages who reach the extreme, and he can't believe he's seeing one in person. The Lich narrows its eyes, asking why the barbarian is here and why he hasn't been lured by the orb. Kettle laughs, guessing that must be how the Lich draws people in. Observing him closely, the Lich notes he senses no arcane and assumes Kettle is meant to be just a normal barbarian. For him to be unaffected, it must be a metal protection artifact, a high-grade one capable of blocking his senses. He can't fathom how a barbarian could possess such an item, but figures the barbarian stumbled upon a good artifact. Kettle shakes his head, saying he has nothing of the sort, and the Lich realizes he can't lie about it. Had he fallen quietly under the spell, death would have been painless, but now he must crush Kettle by force. Summoning skeletons to attack, the Lich watches as they charge. Kettle grins, calling a dungeon with an evil Lich a fun encounter, and finally starting to grasp the situation. A skeleton leaps at him, and he smashes its head clean off, reducing it to dust. The Lich stiffens, surprised, and mutters that he'll see if Kettle can still speak once his limbs are gone, summoning even more skeletons to cut him down. Kettle clenches his fists, smacking one head off, hitting another with his left, sending a third flying with a high kick, and finally slamming the last into the ground, dismantling them all with brutal efficiency. The Lich stands speechless, and Kettle remarks that it's just as he thought. Kaysen was right, destroy the head, and it dies. Being a Lich, Kettle expected at least a Death Knight or some undead more formidable, but it's only skeletons. The Lich, frustrated at Kettle's ease, declares he's done playing nice as his staff glows brightly. A skeleton knight materializes, and Kettle's eyes light up, noting that seeing one again is pretty interesting. He reminds himself that since it's created by a Lich, it might be far stronger than the ordinary. The Lich stretches out his hand, commanding the knight to kill, and it lunges toward Kettle. Clenching his fist, Kettle mutters that a skeleton knight forged by a Lich should be different. As it charges with full intent, Kettle strikes it in the stomach, sending it flying across the cave, its armor exploding on impact. Dust swirls, and the skeleton begins crawling back toward him. Kettle raises an eyebrow, surprised at its resilience, noting it's tougher than the rest. The Lich starts amplifying the skeleton knight's mana to its limits, sending it surging straight toward him, and Kettle watches, curious to see how it will move. As the skeleton knight lunges at Kettle, he remarks that he's somewhat underwhelmed by a creation of a Lich. Clenching his fist, he strikes the knight's head, sending it sprawling backward in another explosive impact. Kettle pauses briefly, curious if it will rise again, while the Lich watches in shock. This time, the knight does not get up, and Kettle casually steps on its hand, noting it's unusual but ultimately not impressive, questioning if this is all it has to offer. The Lich asks who he is, unable to sense any arcane power from Kettle, and noting there's no mana signature that would indicate an artifact. This must be pure strength. The fact that he toppled the skeleton knight with raw power alone baffles him, and he admits to Kettle that he is extraordinary. Curious, Kettle wonders what the Lich intends to do next. The Lich responds that he will personally handle him, and insists that he should consider it an honor. Darkness begins to swirl around Kettle, who feels a thrill as he looks toward the Lich, his eyes glowing in the shadows. The Lich asks if he's afraid, calling it fitting that he will pay for intruding on his sanctuary. Kettle explains he came only because the orb summoned him, believing it was his doing. The Lich confirms, revealing that all who arrive here are drawn by the orbs he scattered, and Kettle was no exception. He demands silence, proclaiming himself the great sorcerer who toppled 5 kingdoms and clashed with heroes, finally revealing his full name, Cardos Bernelius Kessis. Kettle mutters in frustration about why everyone's titles and names are so ridiculously long in this world. Around Cardos, a strange aura begins to shimmer as he declares that Kettle will become the cornerstone of his resurrection. The magic hovers and spins just before him, and as he watches, Kettle notices something unsettling. His eyes begin to feel strange. This is no ordinary spell. It manipulates human emotions, dredging up negativity and trapping its victims within it, leaving them paralyzed and mentally shattered. It's a signature creation of Cardos, highly efficient and nearly impossible to counter with its minimal mana cost. He scoffs, claiming that a mere barbarian incapable of wielding arcane power cannot hope to survive his great magic, and pauses, calculating his next move. Sensing something unusual about Kettle, noting the absence of artifacts, he decides to simply capture him for study. Commanding his skeleton soldiers to seize Kettle, the skeletal forces materialize once again. As they advance, Kettle steps forward calmly, his eyes now clear. With a swift kick, he obliterates a skeleton, reducing its head to dust, and glances back at Cardos, who can only stare in disbelief. Another massive explosion erupts, and Cardos insists the mind control spell should have worked perfectly. Kettle questions if he really just watched him like that, if he truly thought he could trap him with skeletons again, and admits he's bored. Cardos reels, stunned by yet another example of human unpredictability, realizing that no matter how mighty they are, humans are always guided by the negativity buried deep within their hearts. Despite his confidence, Cardos cannot understand why his magic seems ineffective against Kettle, who casually asks if he plans to use a fireball or magic missile. Cardos admits he doesn't know how Kettle is still standing and bristles at the comparison of his supreme magic to such low-tier spells. Determined to prove himself, he begins chanting for a summon, and a swirling form starts to coalesce inside a dark orb. He declares it will devour the world, drowning both clarity and chaos, and Kettle watches, genuinely impressed, as something monstrous begins to materialize from the orb. Stretching out his hand, Cardos sends it hurtling toward Kettle, fully engulfing him. Cackling, he declares victory, but soon spits up a dark substance and collapses to his knees, admitting he has overexerted himself, leaving only enough mana to sustain his body. He reassures himself that at least the barbarian problem is handled. Kettle, still unshaken, compliments the display, leaving Cardos dumbfounded that he remains upright. When Kettle asks if that's all he had, Cardos cannot believe it. He had unleashed the strongest dark spell in his arsenal, one that would have shattered even a legendary hero's mind. He begins to question what Kettle truly is. Calmly, Kettle acknowledges the impressive effort but admits it stirred nothing within him, and seeing the display end, readies himself, placing his axe on his shoulder as he prepares to take control of the situation. Cardos starts laughing, and when Kettle asks what's so funny, he explains that coming here confirmed what he already suspected. Kettle arrived knowing exactly who he is. Confused, Kettle demands an explanation, but Cardos mocks him, saying the Empire fears him so much that they sent Kettle, and he has to admire their intelligence network. Tracking him down this quickly is impressive, but Cardos vows he will rise again, shatter their blades, and reclaim dominion over the world. He recalls hearing of a secret human breeding ground deep within the Empire, a place where extraordinary talents are cultivated, and claims that Kettle must have come from there, trained solely to kill him as an assassin. Howling with rage, he insists that even so, he will destroy Kettle and overturn the Empire. Kettle wonders what on earth is going on as Cardos begins summoning a strange, spiritual vase, which turns out to be a manifestation of his own soul. It hurtles toward Kettle, with Cardos demanding entry into his body. Kettle hesitates for a moment as it becomes clear that Cardos intends to invade his mind and permanently inhabit his body unless he reverts to being a lich, leaving him trapped inside. Cardos laughs, declaring this body his own, but once inside Kettle's mental realm, confusion overtakes him. He realizes something is fundamentally wrong. He has never encountered anything like this, and merely perceiving Kettle's inner world begins to corrupt and collapse his own mind. Cardos begins to spiral mentally, insisting there's no way the Empire could have produced something like Kettle, and as his mind fractures and collapses, his final utterance is a simple, baffled, "Huh." Kettle, watching, wonders what that was all about as the lich simply did something to himself and crumpled to the ground. The black swirling currents were visually striking, but that was the extent of it. He had expected a lich to be the ultimate evolution of a mage and was curious about the magic it would wield, but now he's thoroughly disappointed, concluding that liches in this world must be underwhelming. Having cleared the dungeon, he decides to claim the rewards. He picks up Cardos' staff, noting its glow when used with magic, and wonders if it could help him cast spells too. He also grabs a mana crystal, deciding to keep it for himself, slipping it into his pocket. Glancing at the vase, he reasons that since it belonged to a lich, it might be a life vessel, and plans to have Rosa appraise it. Feeling he's collected all the rewards, something still feels off. His attention is drawn to a suspicious section of the wall. Upon investigating, he realizes it's a hidden room. As he opens it, the wall crumbles, confirming his suspicion, and he steps inside to find multiple people lined against the walls. This was clearly a secret sacrificial chamber. Kettle expresses surprise at the hidden room and wonders what all these people are doing there. He waves at them, even getting close to inspect, but no one responds. Deciding it's best to regroup, he resolves to return to the estate first. After explaining the situation, they'll likely send help to handle it. With that, he heads into the guild hall and walks over to Rosa. Rosa lights up when she sees Kettle, commenting that he's unusually early today. He explains that he had some matters to attend to, prompting her to ask what happened. Kettle recounts the story of the orb he showed her yesterday. At first, Rosa thinks he must be joking, but when he insists he isn't, she reacts in disbelief. She points out that a lich is one of only 5 in the world, and it's impossible for one to appear in a remote place like this. Kettle then produces a vase, explaining that he brought back a jar resembling the lich's life vessel and asks if she can appraise it. Rosa pauses, uncertain if this is some prank, and then her shock turns to full-blown panic as she realizes he's serious. Rosa is still trying to process everything when Kettle tells her that there were a few people inside the hidden chamber as well. He had considered bringing them out, but their minds were already gone, so he left them, suggesting it would be best if the guild sent someone to investigate. Rosa realizes that there have been several unexplained disappearances in the territory, all with no trace of the victims, and concludes that if a lich were responsible, it would make sense. She immediately calls for assistance, and soon the guard captain rushes in, asking if there really was a lich. Kettle greets him but reassures him that everything has been handled and there's no danger. The captain presses for details, then starts shouting Cardos' name in shock. Kettle confirms and asks if the captain knows him. The captain explains that of course he does. Cardos was a legendary sorcerer who upended the world over a century ago, the creator of magic that manipulates emotions to wreak chaos, driving kings mad and destroying 5 kingdoms. He cannot believe Cardos appeared here as a lich and demands confirmation. Kettle admits it's true but notes that Cardos wasn't impressive, simply doing strange things until he self-destructed. The captain is incredulous, insisting there's no way a mage of Cardos' caliber would destroy himself without a fight and demands a clearer explanation. Kettle tells the guard captain that even if he wanted to, he can't provide much more than what already happened. Confused, the captain tells him to wait, while he informs the Lord. Luke is in a panic, shocked that a lich had been right next door, questioning if it could have been something else. The guard captain assures him that, based on survivor testimonies and physical evidence, it's highly unlikely it was any other type of monster. Luke realizes that if a high-level lich like that had been hiding near the estate unnoticed, the Empire could send investigators at any moment, and with Kane away, this is going to be a huge headache. Slamming his hands on the table, Luke instructs preparations to notify the capital, acknowledging that they might have been lucky. Kettle hadn't found the lich yet, and the survivors could have been the first casualties. Cardos was likely in the middle of resurrection preparations, meaning things could have gone catastrophically wrong. Luke concedes this is possible, but even so, he notes that this is a remarkable feat and they must reward Kettle accordingly, assuming they can offer something suitable from their own resources. The next day, at the Lord's estate, the sound of banging and yelling erupts at the door. Luke announces that he's awake and excitedly orders the guest to be let in. The door opens, and a woman rushes inside, announcing that Lord Aquis, the Inquisitor of the Sun God, has arrived at the estate. Surprised, Luke asks what she's doing here and why such a prominent figure has come. He escorts her to the guest room, where they sit across from each other. Luke introduces himself politely, expressing his gratitude for her sudden visit. Aquis remains silent for a moment before introducing herself as the youngest ever appointed Inquisitor of the Sun God, renowned for beheading 7 warlocks who had made pacts with demons and single-handedly disrupting a massive ritual. Currently, she is the most powerful Inquisitor on the continent, wielding authority that even the Empire defers to, far exceeding that of a provincial lord. Luke wonders why someone of her stature is visiting. She explains she has heard the estate has been unusually busy lately. Luke mentions a minor incident at a nearby dungeon that has already been resolved and asks if her visit has anything to do with the lich. Aquis clarifies that she has come regarding a divine oracle. Intrigued, Luke decides it's best to explain recent events. She asks if it's true that a barbarian defeated the lich, and Luke confirms it, noting it might have been Cardos. Shocked, Aquis asks if there's proof. Luke produces Cardos' phylactery, and upon seeing it, Aquis immediately realizes the truth. Gripping her amulet, she asks if the barbarian might still be present at the estate. Luke informs Aquis that the barbarian is still somewhere in the territory. Aquis doubts whether that's even possible, but Luke confirms it, adding that even Lord Cain was defeated by him. She remarks that a new power seems to have emerged and asks which tribe he belongs to. Luke replies that the barbarian claims to be from the White Wastelands. Surprised, Aquis questions how a being from the demon realm could step into the outside world, speculating that the barbarian may be the reason for her visit. She requests to meet him in person. Meanwhile, back at his temporary lodging, Kettle examines the magic stone, pondering how to use it. He notes it seems like an artifact designed to enhance magic and decides he'll consult a mage later. Then he recalls the guard captain mentioning that the Inquisitor of the Sun God requested a meeting at the church and that he should show proper respect. Confident, Kettle reassures him not to worry. Soon, the guard captain checks if he's ready to depart, and seeing him prepared, they head out. Along the way, Kettle reflects that in this world gods truly exist, bestowing power directly and sometimes appearing in person, and that their followers gather at churches. Arriving, he is awestruck by the grandeur, and the guard captain explains someone will guide him inside. Kettle thanks him appreciatively, clearly impressed by the sight. Kettle steps into the church, taking in the ornate decorations and atmosphere. Some of the sisters greet him warmly, explaining that the Inquisitor is waiting and that they will guide him to her room. He nods, and Aquis greets him politely, introducing herself. Kettle responds in kind, noting how young she is and implying that her youth speaks to her capability. She tilts her head, curious about his smile, and he asks the reason she wished to meet, catching her slightly off guard. Lowering her head, she explains it concerns recent events and recounts some of the lore surrounding Cardos, the lich he claimed to have defeated, noting the atrocities he committed and that only heroes could face him. Kettle listens but calmly states that the Cardos he saw was a lich flailing on his own, ultimately destroying himself, and he can offer no proof beyond his own observation. She then asks if he would allow her god to witness their conversation directly. Curious, Kettle asks what she means, and she explains that lying in the presence of the sun god will provoke a divine reaction, essentially acting as a supernatural lie detector. She warns that, even though he isn't a typical barbarian, he might refuse, but Kettle sees it as the perfect opportunity to experience divine power and eagerly agrees. Aquis questions his enthusiasm, asking if it doesn't make him uncomfortable, and Kettle replies that he has nothing to hide, having never told a lie. Realizing she may have judged him too harshly, she accepts his readiness, bringing her hands together in prayer and calling on her god, the sun, to watch and reveal any falsehoods. A massive beam of light descends into the church, and Kettle immediately senses a presence beyond the light, an immense being whose existence defies human description, currently radiating pure confusion. After a moment, Aquis announces that the divine observation is stable and that they can begin, declaring that within this pillar, no falsehoods may exist. Kettle opens his eyes and affirms that he understands. Beneath the blinding radiance of the sun god, Kettle stood face to face with Inquisitor Aquis. Their conversation carried a solemn weight as Kettle recounted the events in the dungeon in detail. The clash with the lich, every action and consequence laid bare. Each word he spoke shone in the divine light, which remained calm and undisturbed, neither resisting nor rejecting him. This was undeniable proof. His account was entirely truthful. Within Aquis' mind, a chilling realization took hold. Cardos must have been severely weakened during his resurrection ritual. At full strength, the barbarian standing before her would have been nothing more than a lifeless corpse. When Kettle finished his testimony, he asked if her doubts had been settled. Aquis admitted they had, even offering an apology for her earlier suspicions. Kettle dismissed it with a calm smile, noting that he had also appreciated the rare experience. Summoning her courage, Aquis asked one final personal question, which Kettle allowed. In a measured but tense voice, she asked if he truly came from the white snowfield. Kettle confirmed without hesitation, and the truth hit her like a thunderclap. Her crimson eyes widened in disbelief. How could anyone survive the demon-infested lands of legend? Memories of the Emperor's tales of the Ashen barbarian flashed before her. Her gaze sharpened, crimson eyes glinting, but before she could speak, Kettle turned the tables, asking why she had really come to this territory. Aquis offered a vague answer about personal business, but Kettle's narrowed eyes cut through her words. He asked directly if her true mission was to determine whether he was an unclean being. Caught off guard, Aquis faltered, attempting to deny it, but Kettle pressed further, pointing out with piercing clarity that the sun god himself had descended to witness their exchange. This was no ordinary divine lie detection, it was a sign of something far greater at work. Under the overwhelming presence of the sun god, Aquis could not lie. Her lips trembled as she admitted the truth. Kettle had been her real target all along. Kettle quickly put the pieces together. Aquis shook her head, insisting it wasn't true, explaining that she had only begun to suspect his connection to an ancient prophecy upon arriving at the estate. Yet, under divine scrutiny, the truth was undeniable. He was not the foretold figure. Ashamed, Aquis apologized for hiding her true intentions, and Kettle accepted her confession with ease, even finding the situation intriguing. Taking advantage of the moment, he asked her to reveal the prophecy itself. Hesitant at first, Aquis gripped the sun-shaped pendant around her neck. Normally, such knowledge was shared only with those she trusted completely, yet something about Kettle compelled her to speak. Slowly, she recited the prophecy, and as her words filled the air, Kettle's expression shifted from curiosity to shock and wonder. When she finished, Aquis fell silent, staring pensively out the great church window. The quiet was broken by footsteps as Lord Barkin approached, immediately noting the conflict in her expression and asking what troubled her. She confessed that she had encountered someone whose presence had left her more conflicted than enlightened. Pressing further, Lord Barkin asked who it was. Aquis answered firmly, "Kettle, the barbarian from the white snowfield." The Lord's eyes widened in disbelief. Could it truly be so? Aquis nodded. She warned that if this revelation spread, it could plunge the entire world into chaos. Lord Barkin could only sigh, heavy with despair, realizing that what he had dismissed as rumor had now been confirmed as undeniable truth. Lord Barkin's expression tightened with concern. He warned that many, including the Emperor himself, had long coveted a journey into the white snowfield. He cautioned that if news of Kettle's origins were to spread, the Emperor's ambition could plunge the world into chaos. Aquis quickly reassured him, explaining that her organization would personally handle the Cardos situation and, most importantly, would ensure Kettle's existence remained hidden from the public. This alleviated much of the Lord's anxiety. Curious, he asked if all barbarians from the white snowfield were as formidable as Kettle. Aquis shook her head decisively, reasoning that if every barbarian were that powerful, they would have long left the snowfield and conquered the world. Lord Barkin agreed, noting that while barbarians were blessed with extraordinary physical strength, they were cursed with a critical flaw: stupidity. He frowned, considering the danger if such beings ever gained intelligence. Aquis' tone grew serious as she explained that Kettle was different, possessing not only immense strength but also a sharp mind. She revealed that the current barbarian king was no ordinary brute. She had met him once, and his presence left her unsettled, distinct from typical barbarians. The Lord speculated that a meeting between Kettle and this king could be intriguing, but Aquis immediately rejected the idea, her voice sharp. Surprised, Lord Barkin listened as she explained that relations between barbarians and the followers of the gods were already tense, and any increase in their power could not be taken lightly. Changing the subject, the Lord pressed her about the prophecy, asking what secret was so critical that it required a private audience between her and Kettle. Aquis confessed that her intention had been merely to confirm one thing: whether Kettle was truly human or some other being disguised in human form. Lord Barkin froze at her words, demanding to know the details of the prophecy. Standing before the grand church window, Aquis took a steady breath, her crimson eyes flickering with unease as she revealed its contents. When she finished, Lord Barkin could only stand in stunned silence, murmuring in disbelief. Later that day, he summoned Kettle once more. The barbarian entered casually, noting that with the Lord's support, life in the territory had been smooth, before asking plainly why he had been called. Lord Barkin straightened, stating there was a matter he must declare as the ruler of the land. Though Kettle appeared indifferent, the Lord continued, announcing that he had prepared a reward to honor the barbarian for saving the territory. At his command, a guard stepped forward, placing a small leather pouch before Kettle. The barbarian blinked in mild surprise. Was this really the great reward? With a faint smile, Lord Barkin explained that the pouch was no ordinary item and encouraged Kettle to inspect it. Kettle picked it up instantly, sensing that there was something unusual about its contents, and the Lord urged him to open it and see for himself. Lord Barkin explained that the pouch was no ordinary item. It was an artifact, A magical bag whose inner space equaled the size of the entire reception hall. Kettle's eyes widened in awe. He had never seen a genuine magical artifact before. The Lord added that it could store countless objects, even items larger than its opening. Eager to test it, Kettle raised his massive axe, eyeing the tiny pouch opening with skepticism. The instant he pushed it forward, the weapon vanished, swallowed entirely by the artifact. Kettle froze, stunned at the impossible sight. Barkin instructed him on how to retrieve it. Simply reach inside and visualize the item. Amazement spread across Kettle's rugged face as he followed the instructions. Hesitant at first, he pictured his axe, and the moment he did, its weight returned to his grip. Pulling it free, the massive weapon emerged as though it had never disappeared. Kettle's eyes lit up with pure wonder. Incredible, he breathed. Lord Barkin smiled at the reaction, telling Kettle that the artifact was his reward for saving the territory, and that he hoped it would serve him well. The barbarian laughed heartily, declaring he loved it and would use it wisely. Outwardly, the Lord closed the matter, but inwardly his mind darkened. The prophecy lingered in his thoughts. He recalled the Swordmaster's warning that creatures from the demon realms were appearing across the land, and now, combined with Akwi's prophecy, the signs became chillingly clear. A great evil would descend upon this territory and spread worldwide. His unease deepened. One of Barkin's villages had gone silent, and only after a neighboring settlement sent men to investigate, who never returned, did he realize the danger was far worse than anyone had imagined. Even his own guards had vanished when dispatched to uncover the truth, confirming that the threat looming over his lands was far more severe than anyone had anticipated. Later, inside the mercenary guild, Kettle approached Rosa to inquire about the day's available quests. She informed him of an urgent request sent directly by Lord Barkin. Curious, Kettle asked for details, and Rosa explained that the task was to investigate the village that had lost all contact. The mission itself was simple, just confirm the situation, but the reward was unusually high, immediately catching Kettle's attention. Without hesitation, he accepted. Rosa smiled knowingly at his eagerness. At the designated gathering point, a familiar voice suddenly called out in shock, "Kettle." It was the priestess Hayes, her eyes wide as she took in his new attire. Kettle explained casually that his old clothes had worn out, so he had commissioned this custom design. Hayes admitted the outfit was unique and impressive, though she seemed distracted by his unexpected presence. When she asked if he had already accepted the mission, Kettle confirmed with a grin, saying he couldn't resist such an interesting job. Hayes reflected once again on how unusual he truly was. Kettle then asked why she was alone and whether her companions, Alexandro and Cass San, were not joining. Hayes explained that they had probably turned down the mission. Observing the crowd, Kettle noticed it was far smaller than expected. Barely 10 mercenaries had gathered despite the high pay for such a simple assignment. He frowned in disappointment. Hayes sighed, explaining that the unusually high reward was not without reason. Rumors claimed the guards sent earlier had all vanished without a trace. The mission was far from simple. Still, Kettle insisted the turnout was too low. At that moment, Hayes reluctantly shared another detail. The heretic inquisitor of the sun god, Akwi's, would be joining the mission, and very few mercenaries dared to work alongside her. Even Hayes admitted that her own fears played a part, imagining Akwi's might decapitate her on the spot. Kettle chuckled, reassuring her with confidence. Hayes is taken aback, stunned by Kettle's words. "You know Lady Akwi's?" Kettle nods casually, a faint smile on his face. "Yes, she's my friend." Hayes stands frozen, mind reeling at the idea. A barbarian counted among the friends of the feared heretic inquisitor. Kettle spots Akwi's arriving at the gathering point and immediately strides over, greeting her with cheerful familiarity. "It's good to see you again." Akwi's red eyes shift toward him, her tone cold and unyielding. "I don't recall us ever being friends." Kettle laughs, brushing off her icy words with ease. "Then let's start today." Akwi's ignores him completely, turning instead to Hayes, who fidgets nervously beside Kettle. "And you? Are you a follower of another god as well?" Kettle blinks in surprise. Akwi somehow knows Hayes. She continues, noting that the followers of Lady Cussie should currently be in their period of rest, with only high-ranking members active. Catching herself, she softens slightly. "I must be mistaken. It's impossible to know every detail of every religious order." Before the awkward silence grows heavier, the guard captain arrives with his soldiers. Kettle brightens instantly at the sight. We meet again," he says warmly, greeting him with casual ease. Aquis remains calm, standing silently at Kettle's side, while haze shifts uneasily, worry etched across her face. The guard captain raises his voice formally, welcoming all who accepted Lord Barkin's request. Once attendance is confirmed, he announces that it's time to depart. Kettle scans the group with a smirk. What a majestic assembly. It almost feels like we're about to storm a fortress. His tone darkens slightly as he turns to Aquis. Does this swift response mean the prophecy has begun? Aquis replies evenly, her voice calm. I cannot say. The god has not revealed when it will come to pass. All we know is that contact with the village has been completely severed, without warning. Kettle narrows his eyes. So there's a chance this is the beginning. The prophecy's words echo in his mind, an unparalleled evil descending upon the world. A smile creeps across his face, not of fear but of excitement. The thought of facing such a threat awakens something wild within him. After a long, careful march, the group reaches the village outskirts. A heavy silence blankets the settlement like a shroud. The guard captain glances at Aquis. What do you sense? Her brows knit with concern. Nothing. No life remains. It's as if the village itself has been stripped of its souls. The captain mutters that perhaps the villagers fled in fear and quickly orders his men to spread out, searching for any clue. Kettle and Hayes nod and move along the shadowed alleys with the others. The captain studies the small village. No more than 100 people could have lived here. For an entire settlement to vanish without a trace defies reason. Yet he insists that some sign must remain. Search every corner, he commands. Even the smallest clue will suffice. Moments later, a mercenary's shout pierces the silence. Captain, over here! The group rushes into a wooden house where the man points to a table. Plates of food sit neatly arranged, steam still curling upward. The captain frowns. Perhaps they left in a hurry. No, sir, the mercenary stammers. The food is still warm, as if prepared only minutes ago. Shock spreads across the captain's face. Days have passed since any contact. How can a meal remain hot? Confusion ripples through the group. Another scout reports in. No footprints, no signs of flight, no hidden survivors anywhere nearby. The village is empty, eerily, impossibly empty. The captain tightened his jaw, giving a sharp order to continue the search, determined to uncover what had happened. As the mercenaries combed through the village, the scene they encountered was both baffling and unsettling. Signs of everyday life were everywhere, half-eaten meals still on plates, tools scattered as if mid-use, clothes hanging to dry in the sun. It seemed the villagers had been living normally just moments before. Yet there was no one left. No voices, no bodies, no footprints, not even a hint of spiritual energy. It was as though the entire population had vanished in an instant. Uneasy glances passed between the mercenaries, each confirming the eerie emptiness around them. Life had carried on here mere moments ago, but now not a soul remained. Turning to Aquis for insight, the captain met a shake of her head. Even she could not explain it. I can't sense what happened here, she admitted quietly. Kettle was next to be consulted, and he too confirmed the absence of any clues. The air felt normal, undisturbed, offering no answers. Frustration flared within the captain, his voice breaking as he demanded an explanation. This is madness, he growled. How can something like this even exist? Yet Kettle stood composed, a strange calm in his tone as he suggested, perhaps the one who knows is already among us. The captain narrowed his eyes, confused. What do you mean? Kettle's gaze sharpened. Because someone else is here with us. The mercenaries froze, shock stiffening their bodies as they scanned the deserted streets for a hidden presence. Then their horror crystallized as they became aware of her, a strange woman, silently standing among them, someone who had not been there a moment before. The captain's face paled, fear gripping him. How long has she been here? The woman offered a faint, unsettling smile, her presence sending chills down their spines. Impressive, she murmured, acknowledging the captain with a cold edge. Most would not notice me. Kettle met her stare without hesitation, certain that anyone would spot a stranger suddenly appearing in a village like this. She laughed softly, shaking her head. No, people only see me when I allow it. Even the sun god's inquisitor failed to sense me. Unease rippled through the group, and Aquis's narrowed eyes, silent and tense, confirmed it. She had felt nothing. Boldly, Kettle stepped forward. Who are you, really? He demanded. The woman ignored him, her gaze sharp and predatory. You are an unexpected prize, she said, danger radiating from her like a brewing storm. The captain's instinct screamed for retreat, urging everyone to flee, but a deeper terror rooted him in place. If even Aquis could not detect this woman, then the truth was unimaginable. She was either not evil at all, or a being of such malevolent power that ordinary senses could not register her existence. A cruel, triumphant smile stretched across her lips. "I have made my decision," she hissed. "Barbarian, you will come with me to hell as my eternal slave." Her form writhed violently, twisting into a nightmarish shape, growing monstrously with unholy power as wings of shadow erupted from her back. Unholy power radiating from her body, while a swirling orb of purple energy grows in her hands, crackling with destructive force. Gasps escape the mercenaries as she rises into the air, floating effortlessly as if gravity bends to her will. Aquis and Ketel stare, momentarily frozen by the overwhelming energy she exudes. Power unlike anything they have faced before. The captain shouts in desperation, "Run for your lives!" But before anyone can move, a translucent barrier flashes into existence, encasing the entire village in a dome of magic. Blades and spells strike the barrier, yet nothing makes a dent. The demon's voice thunders across the empty streets, with cruel finality. "This village is under my dominion. None of you will escape. All of you are mine." Her tongue traces her lips greedily. "My prey." Every face turns pale as the horrifying truth sinks in. They stand before a true named demon, one of the most feared entities in existence. Hayes collapses, trembling, praying frantically. "Oh, Lady Cussy, deliver us. Save us from this evil." A warm, steady hand presses to her head. She looks up to meet Ketel's calm eyes. "Quiet yourself," he says firmly but gently. "I am here. I won't leave your side." Ketel glances at the demon, then asks Hayes in measured tones, "What does it mean for a demon to have a name? What sets them apart from the rest?" Hayes' voice trembles as she responds, hands shaking slightly. "Most called demons are mere fragments of evil, stray magic, pitiful shadows without true power. But the real ones, the originals born from the abyss, they choose their own names, and once named, they become calamities. Even the weakest named demon possesses enough power to destabilize entire kingdoms and plunge them into chaos." Ketel's gaze returns to the woman hovering above them, a realization settling in. She is no ordinary fiend, no trick of magic. She is one of those legendary catastrophes not to be underestimated. Hayes swallows hard, eyes fixed on the demon's curved horns. "I know her, those horns," she whispers. "She is Ashatire, the demoness of gravity. Centuries ago, she appeared in this world, leaving only ruin in her wake." Ketel asks bluntly, "Can the barrier be shattered by force?" Hayes shakes her head in despair. "No, this place is already her domain. The barrier is absolute. The only way out is to defeat her, but that is nearly impossible." Placing a hand against the shimmering wall, Ketel surprises everyone as the surface cracks instantly beneath his touch, fissures spreading for a moment before sealing again. He smirks, concealing the damage, a low laugh escaping him. "Interesting," he murmurs, "I think I'll watch a little longer." Hayes stares, dumbfounded by his calm amusement, but Ketel offers only a reassuring gesture. Above them, Ashatire's mocking laughter rings out. "Tell me, wasn't my little trick amusing? The village you thought full of life, nothing but an illusion, bait I prepared to ensnare you." Aquis's crimson eyes flare with disgust. "Your games are vile, despicable," she thinks. "Summoning a named demon demands an enormous sacrifice of souls, an entire village barely suffices, and to extend a demonic domain so wide unnoticed is impossible. How did she enter this world unseen?" Her voice cuts sharply. "How did you descend into this world without alerting the powers of good?" Ashatire smirks. "And why would I share my secrets with you?" Aquis's fury erupts. "You foul corruption, defiling this sacred land with your presence." Ashatire bursts into scornful laughter. "Sacred land? You pitiful, obedient dog of your god. Tell me, will your mighty sun god save you now?" Her laughter halts abruptly, replaced by a colder, heavier tone. "Listen well, Inquisitor," she intones. "Cracks are spreading in the fabric of this world. Soon it will not belong to humans or gods alone, as you have so arrogantly believed." Her voice carries the weight of history, recounting the ancient war in which gods and men cast the demons into the abyss, securing a crushing victory of light. Now, the seals are breaking. Ashatire spreads her wings of shadow, pressing down with crushing weight. "I am Ashatire, the demoness of gravity. I have waited centuries in the pit of hell for this day. I will erase the shame of defeat and blanket this world in darkness once more." Aquiza's expression hardens, voice sharp with defiance. This world belongs to the gods and to mankind. Return to the abyss where you belong, vile creature. Raising her staff, she begins a sacred ritual, calling upon her god to pour divine power into her body. A massive pillar of golden light envelopes Aquiz, and when it subsides, she stands clad in radiant divine armor, each plate glowing with celestial authority. Her crimson eyes blaze beneath the golden helm, radiating the power of a warrior chosen by the gods. Ashatire tilts her head with interest, summoning a massive crystal scythe that pulses with violet energy. With a confident smile, she declares her readiness to fight. Demons are always arrogant and overconfident, Aquiz murmurs, raising her weapon. In a flash of golden light, she launches forward at superhuman speed. Their weapons collide in a violent clash, divine and demonic forces surging against one another, shaking the ground and hurling both combatants across the battlefield. Recovering smoothly, Ashatire rests her scythe at her side, mocking. A true battle must be fought with dignity and respect. Do the gods' hunting dogs not know even this? Aquiz steadies herself, glares sharp and unyielding. Enough of your nonsense. The clash between the holy warrior Aquiz and the demonist Ashatire shakes the battlefield to its core. Aquiz charges forward with blinding speed, a storm of dust swirling in her wake, eyes blazing with holy fire, but in an instant, Ashatire vanishes as though erased from existence. Before Aquiz can react, the demonist reappears behind her, claws slashing through the air with a sound like tearing wind. Aquiz spins, barely blocking in time, her reflexes saving her from a fatal strike, but horror pierces her heart as Ashatire's claw seizes her divine shield, something no foe has ever touched before. Exploiting the opening, Ashatire strikes with relentless force, hurling Aquiz into the ground with a blow that craters the earth. The demon presses the assault, sensing a weakness in Aquiz's defenses, raining down strike after strike, each imbued with surging dark energy. Aquiz staggers backward, blocking desperately as the onslaught drives her step by step toward collapse. Then she raises her voice, chanting verses from the Holy Scriptures, her words echoing across the battlefield, declaring that no darkness can defile the light. At the final word, a brilliant beam of radiance descends from the heavens, slamming into Ashatire, forcing her to scream in pain and retreat beneath the divine power. Eyes narrowing, Ashatire studies her opponent, sarcasm lacing her voice as she admits surprise that someone so young can wield scripture with such force, mocking Aquiz as more interesting than expected. But Aquiz is not finished. Raising her scepter high, she recites another verse, her voice trembling with fervor as she calls upon her lord to incinerate all evil. Her staff flares with brilliant light, and she rockets forward, breaking the sound barrier. A massive explosion of holy fire erupts, detonating in the demon's path. Chaos engulfs the duel as holy and demonic energies collide at speeds beyond mortal perception, each impact detonating in violent explosions that obliterate the surroundings. The once quiet village becomes a ruin of fire and rubble, buildings collapsing, streets shattering, and terrified mercenaries and villagers scattering in panic as debris rains down around them. Amid the storm of destruction, the battle between Aquiz and Ashatire intensifies, fiercer and more devastating with every strike. Sparks of light and shadow fill the sky as Aquiz and Ashatire's strikes collide in rapid succession, each impact threatening to shatter the earth itself. At the edge of the devastation, Ketil stands calmly, hands in his pockets, eyes glinting with quiet excitement, a faint smile tugging at his lips as though witnessing a grand performance. "Magnificent," he murmurs, savoring the chaos. High, desperate, tears streaking her face, runs to him, clinging to his arm and begging him to aid Aquiz, who risks everything for their sake. Ketil's response is chillingly detached. He admits he could help, yet asks coldly why he should, explaining that he does not wish to ruin such an exhilarating fight. Moments like this are rare, he says, and he intends to enjoy it fully. He confesses a longing to battle a demon himself one day, but for now, he will merely watch. High's heart fills with dread, recognizing the danger in a man who relishes such carnage. Meanwhile, the battlefield roars as Aquiz and Ashatire continue their furious duel, holy light and demonic fire splitting the skies, sparks raining down like stars, the ground trembling beneath the force of their clash. Ashatire admits to herself that Aquiz is every bit as stubborn and unyielding as expected from the dogs of the gods, yet she believes herself superior in raw strength and combat experience. Still, a deeper threat gnaws at her. Divine power is relentless, and she can already feel herself retreating before Aquiz's growing radiance. Time, if the battle continues, will turn against her. A cunning glint lights her eyes, and with a sly smile, she darts across the field at blistering speed, shifting directions in a blur. To Aquis's shock, Ashatire is no longer charging her directly but streaking toward the defenseless mercenaries cowering at the battlefield's edge. Aquis throws herself forward, shield raised, intercepting a torrent of dark energy as Ashatire hammers the barrier with relentless force, straining to crack and weaken it. Screams of terror fill the air as the mercenaries imagine the fate awaiting them should the shield fail. Fury ignites within Aquis, and she lashes out in words, condemning her opponent as a dishonorable, filthy creature. Ashatire laughs cruelly, mocking the notion. Did you truly expect a demon to fight with the honor of knights? She sneers, reveling in the rage she provokes. Undeterred, Aquis raises her scepter, beginning to chant once more, her voice ringing with divine authority. Aquis raises her scepter, chanting with unwavering sacred conviction, her voice booming across the battlefield as she recites one of her most revered verses, words reserved for only the direst of moments. Golden radiance erupts from her body, spilling outward in a blinding wave that coalesces into a sanctuary dome, a holy shield encompassing all. She urges the mercenaries to take cover, and the terrified survivors rush beneath the protective dome, tears and gasps of relief marking their gratitude toward the warrior who shields them from certain death. Ashatire's wicked laughter pierces the air, mocking the effort. So much precious scripture wasted on fragile humans, does it truly matter? Aquis responds with thunderous fury, eyes blazing, while the demon's smile only widens, savoring the righteous anger it provokes. Their clash resumes, weapons and energy colliding in a storm of sparks. Aquis meets Ashatire's fierce attack head-on, but the demoness twists away with astonishing agility, soaring overhead and landing close enough to whisper venomously into Aquis's ear. "Death is only death," she hisses. "No one will honor your sacrifice for these worms. Persist, and you will fall in disgrace, dragging down even the god you serve." Her eyes gleam with cruel temptation. If Aquis releases the holy shield, she could unleash her full power, and if victorious, her honor, and her god's glory, would shine. "Will you truly die for a handful of worthless mortals, priestess?" Aquis tightens her grip, her resolve unshaken, dismissing the words as petty psychological tricks. Ashatire's grin spreads into a vicious smile as she calls out, "Dia martyr," flaring her aura violently. The ground trembles beneath her unleashed might as she channels energy to its absolute peak, hurling a devastating wave of darkness capable of tearing the heavens asunder. Aquis strains with all her strength, her holy light flickering under the overwhelming assault. In a heartbeat, Ashatire materializes like a ghost and unleashes a violent explosion of shadow at close range. Aquis barely dodges, hurtling backward across the ground, regaining her footing, though shock and fear flicker across her face. Ashatire offers no respite, conjuring rings of purple energy that lash outward like venomous serpents, encircling Aquis in suffocating darkness. From above, the demon swoops down like a predator, snarling, "I'm tired of your gods and their scriptures," channeling all her strength into a devastating strike. The attack hurls Aquis violently into the ground, blood spilling from her lips as her body convulses under the impact. At the very last instant, she barely raises her shield to block a claw aimed at her heart, but still she lies pinned, helpless beneath Ashatire's relentless assault. The demoness gathers her dark energy into a massive black sphere in her palm and, with a roar, flings it at Aquis. The explosion shatters the golden barrier that had been shielding the mercenaries, scattering shards of light like broken glass. A survivor's cry of despair pierces the air. "The shield is gone. We're finished." Ashatire's grin widens, eyes glinting with hunger as she leans forward, jaw opening to reveal rows of razor-sharp fangs. But her strike is abruptly halted by a hand clamping down on her jaw with implacable force. Ketel stands there, calm and cold. "That's enough. The game ends here," he says flatly. Both Aquis and Ashatire freeze, stunned by his sudden presence. The demon had sensed nothing, as if he had appeared from thin air. Without hesitation, Ketel's fist crashes into Ashatire's face, the blow detonating like thunder and sending her flying across the village, a shockwave leveling buildings in its path. Brushing dust from his hand, he turns to Aquis, still on the ground in shock. "Are you all right?" he asks, calm and steady. Recognition strikes Aquis. This is the mysterious man who once defeated Sword Master Cain effortlessly. Rising from the rubble, Ashatire's eyes blaze with fury, calling him an arrogant barbarian and demanding how he dared interrupt her feast. Ketel dusts off his clothes and answers without hesitation. "Because Aquis is my friend, and for that reason alone, I will not let her die. Her rage intensifies. Friend? She spits. I was going to keep you alive as my toy after finishing with her. Now you'll regret crossing me. Ketel's lips curl into a smirk. I'm no one's toy, he replies, amusement in his tone. Her expression twists into a wicked smile as she raises her hand, conjuring a massive demonic scythe, its blade dripping with malevolent energy, ready to strike. Akwi struggles to rise, pain etched across her face. She calls out urgently to Ketel, pleading for him to retreat before it's too late. Calmly, he shakes his head, insisting he's more than capable of handling Ashatire. Concern colors Akwi's voice as she warns that physical strength alone cannot defeat a demon. Despite her battered state, she forces herself upright, declaring that only divine power can banish demons and cleanse their corruption, a cosmic law as old as time itself. Ketel observes her carefully, noting the blood on her lips and the tremor in her stance. You don't look fit to fight right now, he says, voice steady. Akwi's eyes blaze with determination. It doesn't matter. I serve the god, and it is my duty to confront evil until my last breath. A moment of silence passes, then Ketel nods slightly. Your faith is remarkable, he admits, but you should rest. Leave this fight to me. Akwi stares in disbelief, but he only smiles confidently. I've always wanted to face a demon, he adds. Now I'll see how strong I truly am. Ashatire laughs mockingly. You think your pathetic human fist can harm me? Ketel's smirk doesn't falter. Let's find out. The demonist's aura erupts, a swirling storm of shadow tearing into the earth as she rockets forward like a black arrow. Akwi gasps, fear gripping her chest, certain Ketel will fall. Yet he remains unmoving, palm steady. As Ashatire's claws slash toward him, Ketel's fist rockets out, striking her squarely in the face. Bone shatters, her skull caves under the force, and her body is hurled into the air, the shockwave splitting the ground beneath. Akwi can only stare in disbelief. The seemingly ordinary man has obliterated a demon's full-speed assault with a single, devastating punch.